So this talk is split up into two parts, and I also want to get your input on which part I should focus on more. So the like how to view the college admission process and what sort of things you should do to map out your college career. That's more general, just to the application process in general. And then the second part is more specific to Stanford. So Stanford's admission process, the 3 Stanford essays they make you write, and things like that. So raise your hand if you want me to focus a little more on the first half, so just general college admissions talk. I gave a talk at Sherry's place 2 years ago, right after I got into Stanford about this, so. Okay. Raise your hand if you want me to just focus more on Stanford. Let's see. Okay. And raise your hand if you want me to sort of just do it 50-50. Okay. So that means the first slides are probably going to go by a little faster then, because those are the ones that are more general.
Can you also tell us which colleges other than Stanford you got admitted to? Can you give us a
Yeah, sure. Okay. So my name's Kimberly. I'm a junior right now at Stanford, so I'm about to enter my 3rd year, and I am an economics major with a minor called mathematical and computational science, which is a mix of math, computer science, and statistics. So before I get started, I feel like this is something that people sometimes forget in the Bay Area because we focus so much on college. It's just that there really is no formula to getting in. I have friends who got in for like dance, who got in for art, who got in for science competitions, one of my friends literally got in because he's a really good yo-yo player, and people thought that that would add a lot of like culture and like, I guess, enthusiasm to Stanford campus. So you really have to remember that there's no certain steps that you can take that are really going to ensure your admission. I just want to talk about little things that you can do to help it as much as possible, but there's really no guarantee. So I'll be covering first my experience and what I did in high school, how the admission officers viewed college applications. So after I got into Stanford, I was like talking to my admission officer about what the application process is like when they're reading through it, and got a lot of insights into that. And then each part of the application, and then Stanford specific things. And we'll leave Q&A until the end, so you can ask me whatever you want. So what I've done since Stanford is pretty much a mixed bag. So I got into college and had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I took classes in like 12 different subjects. I decided to start getting involved in finance. So I'm on the board of directors of the Stanford's investment fund, which invests part of Stanford's $1 trillion or so of endowment. I'm vice chair of a public policy group on campus, which brings speakers like Al Gore and Kofi Annan and like David Petraeus to campus and things like that. I was editor-in-chief of the Stanford Undergraduate Economics Journal. Like I mentioned, I'm an econ major. And during my summer, so the summer after my freshman year, I did a Stanford fellowship, so they funded me to go to Sarajevo, Bosnia all summer, where I worked at USAID, or the U.S. Agency on International Development, and with a specific organization called Internews to help with ethnic tensions in the Balkan region after the breakup of Yugoslavia. And then last summer, or I guess this summer, I spent doing investment banking at Goldman Sachs in the tech, media, and telecom group, which is considered one of the most prestigious groups in investment banking because it's Goldman Sachs and because tech is such a big focus, as we all know, in Silicon Valley. So I went to Limbrook High School in San Jose, and things that I specifically did at Limbrook was I was very heavily involved in my speech and debate team. Is anyone here from Limbrook, actually? Oh, it's a great school. I miss it. So speech and debate at the time I was there was the largest club on campus, and we had maybe roughly 200 members and a middle school branch as well as an annual high school branch, and then like 10 different specific events and all that stuff. So I had to manage all of that as well as compete in Lincoln Douglas debate, which is the kind of debate I did. I was also, yeah?
You can just provide slides to us, huh?
So I think the way it worked last time I did the talk was that slides weren't emailed out, but I'm like, I don't know, I guess it's up to Sherry really. It's not really my decision. I'm happy either way.
Are we getting slides?
They want to know if the slides will be emailed out afterwards. No? Okay. But you feel free to take photos of any of the slides that you want. I was also on the San Jose Youth Commission, which is essentially the youth form of San Jose City Council. So I was the youth representative for District 1, which encompasses like Limbrook High School, encompasses, I can't remember, like MIDI, all those schools like that in this area. And I represented 23,000 students in youth government. Then I also founded an organization called Overture Literary Magazine, which was the first Bay Area middle school literary magazine, because I know a lot of people here focus on STEM and things like that, but that wasn't really my focus in high school, and I wanted to make sure people got exposed to things like the liberal arts and writing earlier in life. So I started this at Miller, which was my middle school, and grew it for about 2 years, and I think it's still running as of now. So I'll talk a little bit more about how I think these played into my application process, but for now that's just what I did. And lastly, I did a lot of writing competitions. So I entered essay competitions I found online. I published things in journals wherever I could find them, so like Huffington Post, San Jose Mercury News, things like that, just to sort of get my word out there and practice my writing skills a little bit more.
Yeah, question, how did you get the San Jose Youth Commission position?
So I was involved in this thing called the Youth Advisory Council, which is essentially each youth commissioner, so there's 11 across the city, has their own like youth council. So I had applied initially through that, which was just advertised at my school, and then worked my way up from there. And when you have to interview with the San Jose council members, like staff or the council member himself. So like Limbrook, for example, is like a really good, like Alvin Fan, who's a senior right now at Limbrook, he's the current commissioner. So like for example, and there's one for every city, so if you don't live in San Jose, the Saratoga has a youth commission, I know Sunnyvale has a youth commission, they're all over the place, so you just got to be able to find the right people and reach out to them to see how you can get involved.
Can you show the previous slide again?
Sure. So the first two are things that I did the summer after my freshman year and the summer after my sophomore year, and then a couple of other organizations I'm involved in on campus.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. So something I think that's really important to remember about college admissions is that they're really just people. There's, like I said before, there's no formula. So that not only means that randomness is inherently going to be involved, but it also means that when you read your application, you don't have to think about, oh, my admission officer was an English major at UCLA, so I need to write about how much I love English to make them like me more. Like, that's not the way it works. I had a friend who actually did that. They like looked up their admission officer, found that they were an English major at UChicago, and then wrote a poem for their essay, which like is fine if you're a poet, but he was a neurobiology major, so it didn't really make much sense. And then logically, when an admission officer is looking at it, they're going to be like, why is he doing this? This doesn't make any sense. So just look at it as if you're an actual human and see, like, does this make logical sense with who this person is? Is it good? Like, things like that. These are things that parents can all help with, because if it makes sense to you and it's good to you, it's probably good to someone else too. Really quickly, just run through the parts of a Common App for people who aren't familiar with it. So the Common Application is essentially a central portal that most colleges use when basing their decisions. So that means that you have like the applicant personal information, future, so what you're thinking of doing, demographics, like what gender are you, what ethnicity are you, what does your family do, what high school did you go to, like what's your SAT scores, things that every college would be interested in. And then there's a supplement section, which all these colleges want, that's more specific to them. A couple of common exceptions are just MIT, Georgetown, the UC system, things like that. Here's an example of what the Common App looked like, at least when I was applying. I tried looking up like what they look like now, but I can't make a Common App account, so I can't do that anymore. But it's fairly similar from what I understand. So there's still 5 basic honor sections of things that you've achieved. So what I put there was like writing competitions that I'd won and like debate tournaments that I did really well at. In the extracurricular section, there's 10 places that you can fill out. So they ask you, for example, I don't have a stick, but they ask you like how many years you've been involved in it, how much time you spent on it, did you do it school year, summer break, and like what was your title, what honors did you hold, so things like that. And you should think when you're building out your like high school career, what sort of stuff you're going to be putting on it. So you don't want to start everything, for example, junior year, because then they're going to know that you started at junior year, and they're going to know you probably started it just because you realize college apps are around the corner. So all these things play a really big part in knowing like how you should structure it, because ultimately this is what they're going to see about what you did for your high school career. Then there's the essay section, which I know everyone worries a lot about. The first one is just a short answer on like one of the activities that you did. So me specifically, I wrote about the literary magazine that I founded because I thought that's what made me the most unique. I was angling my application to be somewhat of, I'll talk about that a little later, but essentially I wrote about that because I thought it was the thing that was the most unique. There's a lot of people who do youth government, and there's a lot of people who do speech and debate, but not a lot of people start their own literary magazine. And then here are the 5 topics that are the most recently announced for 2015 2014 to 2015, I think, or 2015 to 2016. They're pretty vague, so I feel like really whatever you want to write about, you can make it work. I didn't even think about like which essay topic I was gonna address. I just wrote an essay that I thought would be good, and then figured out which one of these buckets it was gonna fall into. Because no admission officer is gonna be like, this is a great essay, but it doesn't fall under one of these categories. Like that just doesn't really matter. These are more just to help you think about really how to structure your essay and what things you could write about. So this is where I think it becomes a little more helpful for most people. Can you raise your hand if like your student maybe has a college counselor right now, or if this is more, or raise your hand if your student has like a college counselor. Okay. Oh great, so I should probably talk more specifics about this then. So the way the college admission process works is that admission officers look at things from the most objective thing to the least objective thing. And that makes sense, right? Because if you're going to apply to a school like Stanford, they have about a 5% admission rate, so 95% of the students are rejected. And that means that if there's any reason to reject you, they're going to do it. So they're really looking for a reason to reject you at any point. And the easiest thing to do is for the things that are more objective. So if your scores don't line up, if your GPA is not good enough, that's an easy reason to say, oh, they're not going to be able to fit in with the academic rigor at our institution. So the first thing that they're really going to look at is your GPA and your SAT scores and things like that, your AP scores. And that's why it's so important to get good scores on those, is not just because a 2400 is going to guarantee you entrance into like Yale or Harvard, but it's just because they're going to be like, oh, they can handle it. Then it goes letters of recommendations, extracurriculars, and then finally essays. And then I'm going to go into more specifics about each one of these in later sections. Are there any questions before I move on? So the first things was scores and GPAs. Like everybody knows, like a good GPA is absolutely crucial because first and foremost, these institutions are academic institutions and they want to make sure you're going to actually be able to complete a degree, you're going to do well, and you're going to contribute something to the college campus when you're there. And if you don't have a good GPA, then that's a really strong signal that you're not going to be able to keep up in classes. People ask me a lot of time, like, what does a good GPA mean? And it's really hard for me to answer that because it's very dependent on the person. So I got a B in PE my freshman year of high school, and that ended up being the only B I got. So like in that instance, it doesn't really matter because they're not going to be like, oh, she like isn't going to be able to run fast enough, so I'm not going to let her into college. I'm like a really slow runner, so that was why. But for someone who's applying, for example, as a history major, if you get a B in AP US History and a B in like AP Government, then that's a really probably not a strong indication that you're going to do very well in history. But if you're, let's say, a biology major who got a B in AP US History, then it doesn't matter as much, right? So it's not just what your overall GPA is, it's also just what classes you took and what classes you actually did well in. So I can't really give an answer to what a good GPA is, but obviously just do as well as you can and take as rigorous of classes as you can while still doing well.
What about AP courses? How many?
So AP courses, it really depends. So for me, what I had done was, Lundberg doesn't let you take AP courses until your junior year. So I wasn't allowed to take any, obviously, until junior year. And what happened was that I took chemistry honors and pre-calculus honors my sophomore year. Then junior year, I was angling myself to be more of a humanities, liberal arts person. So I took AP Language and Composition for my English course, AP US History, and AP Calculus, BC. And then I took physics honors and Spanish. And then my senior year, I took only APs. So I took AP Literature and Composition, AP Statistics, AP Government and Econ. AP Physics and AP Spanish. So I only took 5 classes my senior year, but they were all AP courses. And I'd recommend taking AP classes earlier if you can. And the reason why is that Stanford only got 3 of my AP classes by the time I had applied. They knew I got a 5 in all 3 of those, but it was still only 3. And a lot of people in other places around the country aren't like restricted to taking APs their junior year or something. So a lot of people probably amassed like 6 or 7 AP scores by the time they applied. So while they knew I was a good student by Lundberg standards, they couldn't really understand how that compared to the rest of the school. And my admission officer actually like noted that in my admission file, which by the way, I was allowed to read because of like a fluke that happened. I don't know if you guys read in the New York Times about how Stanford had this big controversy of somebody who like discovered a way to read your admission file. It was like all over the news, it was a really big deal. So I read mine, and they actually wrote that in my application, was that my like academic my scores were great, so I got a really good grade on my scores, but in terms of like the classes I was taking and the rigor of that, they actually noted whether or not I'd be able to handle it. So if you can take them earlier, that would always be better. SAT, like I said, it's just a threshold, so as long as you can get above a 20, I would say above a 2300, don't even bother retaking it, it's not worth your time. Above a 2250 is most likely fine, but considering that all the people in this room essentially are Asian, Asians tend to score a lot higher in the SAT, which means that you have to score a lot higher relative to your peers, and that's just like a sad fact about the way it is. So, and then
On the
yeah.
AP side, do you have to get all 5s or 4s? What's the-
Yeah, you don't need to get all 5s. Obviously, that's best. Like, I think your student should just aim to get as many 5s as possible. I don't think it's the end of the world if they don't, but they should try.
Is there a threshold, I guess, if you have to get 50% 5 or 80%?
I can't tell you like a specific threshold because it also depends on what APs and stuff you're taking. But I would say if you get at least 75% 5s, that should be good. But the more, the better in that case. Because because the way the APs work is, I feel like the way they're curved is very, very generous because it's compared to the rest of the nation, not just compared to the rest of Silicon Valley. So if you're getting, for example, a 5 on AP Calculus BC, you only need to get like 65% of the questions right or something, from what I remember, because the curve is just so generous that schools are familiar with that. So if you don't get a 5, then they know that you fell below that certain threshold.
But some of it is very difficult, right? Like more history is only
Yeah.
6%, so.
Yeah, for those, like, I think it's fine to get a couple 4s. I don't think it's going to be at the end of the application, but obviously it looks good if you get 5s. But I don't think that's going to, like, doom the student in any sort of way. SAT 2s are the subject tests that you need to take. Most colleges only require 2. Taking more than 3 I don't think is worth your time either. I took 3, so I took AP Literature, SAT Literature, SAT 2, so the Math 2 one, I don't remember what it's called, and the SAT History one. And the reason why I said before is because I'm angling myself to be a more humanities sort of person. And I think, yeah.
How about the additional AP tests that are held in May? You know what I'm talking about?
The ones that are scored like out of 5 and stuff.
Okay, so is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So when you take an AP class, that's essentially just a course that you take at school that's supposed to be college level, but that whole class is supposed to prepare you for the AP test in May.
Okay,
So you get as many A's as possible, obviously, in those classes, but then the score is the one that's nationally held, so it's the same standard.
Got it.
Yeah.
The SAT 2 in English literature, that one, how much you get? The one is, I heard this one is difficult.
Yeah, I remember it was really hard. What did I get? I think maybe I got a 780. Something around that. I'm not positive though, to be honest. I remember what I got on my SAT 1, but I don't actually remember what I got on all my SAT 2s anymore. But I think above a 750 is fine as well. Like, I was applying as like a humanities person. I didn't get an 800 on my SAT lit, and it didn't really matter. Out of curiosity, how many of you have heard about the idea of like packaging your application for like a theme? Okay. That's really, okay. So what I mean by that is something I should have mentioned earlier, but when colleges look at your application, they're not looking for someone who's like the most well-rounded student. I know that's a really common myth. It's like, oh, be really good at basketball, be really good at math, be really good at science, and like write award-winning essays. That's obviously good, but what they really want is a well-rounded class. So it's not about having each student in there be able to be good at everything, but rather everything out there in the world, they have one student who is good at it. So that means that they want a well-rounded class, so you need to be a little, not well-rounded, but a little bit like oblong, if that makes sense. So you need to be really good at like one specific thing and be able to show, I am the student who is going to contribute this to your college campus, right? Because there's plenty of people who are going to be their ASB president and their basketball captain and be president of science club, but that doesn't mean very much because that's just at the school level, and that just means that, okay, you were good at your school, but there's someone like that at every single school, and all those people are applying, and it's really hard to stand out. So what they want is somebody who's actually a standout in one specific area. So when I say that I was like packaging my application to be a certain way, I mean that I was trying to tell them what angle I was going to be in, like what niche I was going to fulfill at that school. And for me, that was going to be the person who was really involved in like writing and public policy and being very opinionated about social justice issues, and that tied into well to all the things that I did in high school. So I like started my literary magazine, so I was very involved on like a grassroots level, which is very similar to policymakers. I was actually in like youth government on the city council level, and in speech and debate all we do is debate like social justice issues, so they all tied in really well together. All the essay competitions I did were related to like peace around the world or like Holocaust remembrance, things like that. They're all like very in similar areas, so when they read my application they were like, it made a lot of sense what I was passionate about and what I would bring to the campus. Because if you're involved in a bunch of other different things, it's very hard to say what the student is actually passionate about and what they're going to do once they get to campus. And they kind of want to see how you're going to live like at Stanford, how you're going to live at UC Berkeley, all these places. So it's really good to have to package your application in that way. So that's all I mean. Yeah.
So your literary thing was done in middle school, is that right?
So I started it my junior year of high school, but I started it for middle school students. So I would go to my local middle school once every 2 weeks or something, work with like a group of students. We'd publish a magazine once a month that would be put online. We like won grants from like State Farm and stuff to help print copies of it. Just a lot of things like that. I would say like the whole idea of like packaging your application around a theme is one of the most valuable pieces of advice I got, because it's something that I think a lot of students don't actually take into account, and that's something that's very easy to control through your application. So my sister, for example, she just graduated in 2014 from Yale, and she was a history major, and what she did was right before her college application time, she was working with her AP US history teacher at Lynbrook to write a history paper like on her own that she was going to submit to this really like renowned high school publication called the Concord Review. And that really showed through in her application, because it wasn't like she didn't even get it published by the time she had applied, but she worked with this teacher really hard. He wrote about it in her application, and it's something hardly any student ever does. So when she applied to Yale as a history major and said, I wrote like a 30-page long essay about Woodrow Wilson and like something, I don't even remember what it's about anymore, that really showed through her application, because it was really unique, and it made her look like she had a passion, even if she wasn't like the president of a million different clubs.
So for the SAT, if a ninth grader took it and got above 2,300, is it good enough, or does he need to take it again? So I keep hearing about this.
You're a 9th grade student, took the SAT?
Uh-huh.
Oh my god. So I took it spring of my sophomore year,
Yeah.
and then I got a 2360, and then I never took it again.
Yeah.
I would say if you take it 9th grade and get above 2,300, you should be fine. Like, they're not going to think that you're getting dumber as like school goes on, so I don't think that it's necessarily a big concern. If he's worried about it, like maybe take it again.
No, he doesn't want to take it again.
I really don't think
But
he
I
needs to
heard
take
from
it again.
other people saying that, oh, they took it in ninth grade, they end up having to take it again in junior year, because some college like it to be like within 2 years of your application.
So that makes sense to me in the sense of like, for example, like recommendation letters, which is something I'm about to talk about. You want your junior year teacher to write it because it's closer to the deadline, right? So they know like this is how you were like last year, not this is how you were like 3 years ago. But I feel like because the SAT is such a structured thing, it tests like the same thing year after year. I don't think there's going to be an actual difference between when you take it freshman year and junior year. So if he wants the junior year, just like take it to see if he does better, then like he can do that. It's probably not going to hurt his application, because you get to choose which scores you send in anyway. But I don't think he should expend a lot of effort to study for it again. Like that seems like a waste of
SAT will
time.
be different by the time he's in junior year. It's going to be a new SAT. That's why he wants to be done with it. Because,
I don't think so. Like, it's pretty impressive to me that if you can get above a 2,300 your freshman year anyway. Like, I don't think any college is going to be like, especially if he does well in other areas and he's still doing well in his grades, to be like, oh, I don't think he can score above a 2,300 again, sort of thing. Like I said before, like admission officers are human, so if something like makes logical sense to you, it probably makes logical sense to them too. So the next thing I was going to talk about was the letter of recommendations, which is the next most objective thing or least objective thing. And you're going to want 2 junior year teachers to write this, like I mentioned before, because they want to see how you were like almost immediately before you apply for college. So don't ask your freshman year teacher to write one. They don't know how much you changed in high school. The way that I looked at admission or letters of recommendation was that you want one from like a humanities side, so like a history, English teacher, that sort of thing, and then one from a sciencey side, so like a math teacher or a science teacher, something like that. And the reason why is because, yes, you're trying to angle yourself to be a certain kind of person to package your application. They still need to know that you're going to be, like, you were a strong student all the way around. And the best way to do that is to just split it up. Like, you should be excelling in all your classes anyway, so it doesn't matter. So what I had done when I had entered junior year is I sort of knew going in which teachers were going to write my recommendation letter before I'd even, like, had my classes. And it's because I wanted to angle myself as sort of a writing person, so I knew my AP language and composition teacher was going to write one because that was my English class. And I knew that I wanted a sciencey person to write one, so I decided between AP Calculus and Physics Honors. I liked my AP Calculus teacher a lot more because I had her for pre-calculus, so I was like, she's going to write my recommendation letter. So I knew, like, going in, and then that entire year, like, I made an effort to be known by that teacher. So I would, like, ask them questions during, like, I don't know if you guys have tutorial, but it's like this little period where you can, like, ask questions and stuff. So I got to know them through that. I asked them for help when writing, like, essays that I was going to submit for competitions. My math teacher, I just, like, always volunteered in class. She wants you to, like, write answers on the board when people don't know how to solve problems, and I made an effort to always do that. Did all the, like, Camel AMC stuff because she was the one that was running it, even though there was, like, no chance I was going to place into USML or something. So just things like that to make it known and so that they know you're making an effort, and when they write your application, there's something very specific they can say about you. So I know that, like, most students don't do this, and that becomes a really big problem when it comes to writing letters of recommendation, because the most they can probably say is, like, they were a good student, like, they always turned in their homework, they did really well in school. But that doesn't make you stand out ultimately in the end, because they can see that from your application already. Like, they want to know what you did in the class that isn't going to be reflected in just your grades and your test scores and stuff. So
So you were really targeting the liberal arts side of things and like art science and math, right? But you actually went for a engineer from a math teacher, and also AMC and all that stuff, right? Would that be better if you have two letters from the liberal arts side instead of math?
I don't think so. So the reason why I don't think it's good to get, like, both my history teacher and my English teacher is I think they're too similar, so I don't know if they'll be able to say different things about me, right? Because the classes operate in pretty similar ways, and you like write papers and you do discussion sections and stuff, that I don't think one is going to add as much value as getting someone from a completely different side who can speak to a completely other perspective of how I am. And I also anticipate that my extracurriculars and my essays are going to bring out that liberal arts like passion that I was going to go for, that I didn't need my letters of recommendation to do the same.
So it made it stronger, but for something like the AMC, is that necessary? Or?
Oh, not from, so I didn't even write that I, like, took the AMCs in my application. I just did it because I, like, one, they were kind of fun, and two, because I wanted my teacher to, like, know that I was, like, still putting effort into the class and trying to apply things. So it was still that my teacher would, like, know that I was still trying in the class and with the subject material. You also need one letter from your guidance counselor. There's, like, about, I think, maybe 4 to 5 guidance counselors at each school, and they're responsible for, like, 400 to 500 kids. So that means each guidance counselor is responsible for, like, 100 kids. So it's very hard for them, obviously, to be very specific too. So what I did was I got to know my guidance counselor really well. Like, I don't know how many students go to visit their guidance counselor, probably not very many, but I became really good friends with mine because I thought she was really funny. So we would chat a lot just about, like, what I was doing in school, like what classes I should take, things like that. I would stop by the office to say hi to her, like, when I was leaving for school, like maybe once a week or something. So she really got to know who I was, and that means that when she wrote the application, she could actually write very specific things about what I was doing in school. Like, she knew like what sort of thoughts were going through my mind and stuff, and that makes for a much more compelling application as well. You also have the option to do an optional supplemental letter of recommendation if you think there's a different perspective that isn't being brought out through 2 teachers and a guidance counselor. What I did was I had, so I had my debate coach write a recommendation letter for me, not to say, like, oh, how good I was at debate or whatever, quote unquote good, but because they can see that through my application already, right, through, like, awards or, like, my positions or whatever. But I did it because I was really involved in coaching younger students, both through the summer camp that we run and through our middle school branch, and I didn't think that was able to be conveyed through, like, this tiny little section, right? Like, if you commit a lot of your time to something, it's very hard to fit it into those 2 lines to say everything that you did. So I had my debate coach write a recommendation letter for me that could elaborate more on exactly how involved I was, like what a big deal all of these things were. I would say only do a supplemental letter of recommendation if you're absolutely sure, like, it'll bring something else to your application. And I think that's true for any additional letters or any additional materials you're going to send in, because admission officers are reading like thousands of files. They don't want to read something that's unnecessary. So if you send them a mediocre or something, it's probably going to detract from your application because they're going to think that you were wasting their time. So some things that you could send in is if your child is, for example, doing science research and they're really good at it, to send in like their science abstract, or to have the mentor that they're working under write them a recommendation letter. If they're really good at music, I've had friends who sent in musical supplements. So like they send in a CD of them singing or a CD of them like playing piano or something. And those actually get viewed like very seriously. So my roommate applied and she was incredible at piano, so she sent in a letter, or she sent in a CD of her playing piano, and they sent it to Stanford's music department to listen to see how they were good. So they listened to all the musical supplements that were sent and decided like, yes, hers was really good. And it turned out to play a big factor in her application, because then when she got into Stanford, the music teachers at Stanford actually reached out to her to be like, hey, like we heard your CD, we really liked it, like let us know when you're on campus so we can come talk to you about the music department at Stanford. So like things like that. But obviously you have to be really, really good at something to be able to do that, because I played piano in high school, but I wasn't very good at it, so there's like no way I was going to send them something, because it would just be embarrassing on my part. Other people also sent in like videos of them playing volleyball. I had a friend who like composed like a musical piece and like sent in the musical composition. Just anything like that that you think brings in another element. The next section is extracurricular activities, and this is something I know gets a lot of focus on in our area. So like I said before, there are 10 spaces in the Common App for extracurricular activities, and spaces for you to really say what you've been involved in. And there's a ton of things you can get involved in. So you can do sports, academic competitions. I know everyone knows about like USIMO or like the Intel Science Talent Fair, all those things. There's business groups like FBLA, DECA, you can start your own business or nonprofit, music, all these things. But like I said before, you don't want to get bogged down in trying to do all of these, because if you do like things that are all so different, not only are you going to tire out really easily, like there's just not enough hours in the day, but it also is not going to reflect in your application like what you're actually interested in and what you're going to contribute, which is what I was talking about before, is a really important component. So my best advice is honestly to do what you're interested in, because it's not only going to make high school that much more enjoyable for you, but it's also probably going to be something that you're going to be very good at, that you can excel in, and some passion that's going to be able to translate in your application. So they really want to see essentially that you're just passionate about something, and that there's something that you're going to be able to do with your degree once you leave the school. And to do that, that means that you're going to have to show that passion in the application, so make it specific. Yeah.
How could you have 10 extracurricular activities? That's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. So that's why I don't think the ones that are below maybe like number 5 are that important. So what did I put? I put speech and debate as number 1. I put my youth government thing as number 2. But the literary magazine, I found it as number 3. I wrote for the Huffington Post, so I put that as number 4. Then various writing competitions I did. I think I just literally put like writing competitions and then like listed them as number 5. Mm-hmm. I was involved in FBLA in high school for the first 2 years a lot, but not so much in the later years. So I put that down. I like had officer positions, but wasn't like very actively involved in them. I was like a staff writer for my high school literary magazine, but that was pretty much just like a once a week commitment. You go to their meetings, you like write a poem, you get it workshopped. So I put that down. And then after that, it gets like a little bit like iffy. So like I had like tutored, so I tutored a lot of students, and I thought that showed like also my involvement with like younger students and my writing abilities. So I put that down as well. And then it was just like in 10th grade one time, I decided that I really wanted to do something for like the developing world. So I did a shoe fundraiser that was going to go to a nonprofit that literally takes the shoes to these places and gives shoes to kids who otherwise get like worms in their feet because they don't have shoes to protect them. So that was like a one-time thing I did. It took me maybe like 2 weeks. I put that as like number 10 on my application. And I don't know if that factored into anything at all, but I do think you should fill out all 10 sections, just because that's really important to being able to say that you were involved in a large variety of things. Don't worry about having 10 amazing things though, because you're gonna kill yourself if you do that. Like it's just too much to handle.
Sorry, your number 2 and 3?
Oh, so I did debate as my number 1, the youth government thing. So San Jose Youth Commission is number 2, and the literary magazine I founded was the 3rd one.
Okay, thank you.
And judging from like the admission letter that I got, so Stanford when you get accepted, your admission officer writes you a little letter to say like, oh, we really liked blah 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 blah. They really liked that literary magazine because it was something that was like very very unique. It's something I put a lot of time into, and it's something that like you sort of build something out of nowhere. And I think they really saw that as something that I could bring to campus once I got there.
Yeah, you mentioned about the 10 common extracurricular activity, and then you mentioned this one that you put a writing competition award inside, and I remember there were another session is a 5 honor awards. So how did you decide which one you should like you put the writing competition in the extracurricular activity, or instead of you put in the honor?
Sure. So I put 3 essay competitions in my honors section that they were like international or national essay competitions that I had won some kind of degree in. I don't think I got, no, I won one of them, but I got like second place on other things like other ones. So I put the ones that I thought were the most impressive there. And then I'd also done a lot of other smaller ones. So like online journals that I like found through like just my own searching. I published in like John Hopkins CTY's like Imagine magazine. I like sent them an article about a summer program that I had done after my sophomore year. But like those weren't big enough to put in like an honors section because they weren't really an award. They were more just a publication. So I put that in that section. So like I think it's very different to like win a writing competition and to get something like published in not like a huge journal. So I also created a WordPress for myself. It was that had like a bunch of writing competitions, just like publications that I'd had for like really small things. And I linked the WordPress to like my own little like website, and that way if they wanted to see my writing, they could just click it and like go see it. So that was another thing, just for them to see that I really was engaged in writing, and I put like everything I'd ever written and submitted somewhere on that website. Yeah, so for example, I think that it's something that's really important to think about here is that I know I mentioned that you should be really targeted in one specific area, so be sure like you have a niche and you have like this passion, but within that area that you go very deep in, you want to broaden in that space. And what I mean by that is if you're really good at, let's say, math, you not only want to like be an officer in the math club, but you also want to participate in math competitions. You also probably want to tutor students in math. You also probably want to go to like a math camp in high school or something, like one of those like RSI or like the MOP programs or those sort of things. And we see what I mean by that is that yes, you're angling yourself in a math way, but it's not like you only did math competitions. You showed your passion through a lot of different routes within that space. So that's something to also think about. And all those things I just mentioned. So if you're officer in a math club, if you do a lot of math competitions, if you tutor students in math after school, if you go to like a math program, that's 4 things that you can put on your application right away to get rid of those 10 spaces, which is helpful when you have 10 spaces you have to fill. Do you have any questions about extracurriculars before I move on? Yeah?
So was the Huffington Post thing a one-time thing, and is there anywhere else in the application to put a one-time activity?
The Huffington Post was not a one-time activity, so I think I had published maybe 8 articles by the time I had applied to that. So yeah, so I put myself as like a blogger for the Huffington Post. It wasn't just a one-time thing. And I'd also done it since sophomore year of high school, so if you remember the little 4 boxes where you can check how many years you were involved in, I was involved from a pretty early stage. Is there anywhere else you can put a one-time thing? Yes, you can either write about it in your essay if it was something that was very impactful to you, or what you can do is, and this is something I did, I felt as if the 10 spaces filled everything important I needed to do, but it didn't really elaborate, right? Like I mentioned before, there's only 2 lines. So I actually added to the end of my essay section, so there's like an essay where you just upload a PDF. So I uploaded at the end of my essay also like an additional information section and put like summer programs that I went to that I didn't think were important enough to include, so like debate camps I went to, and the fact that like I achieved like level 10 in piano thing. I don't remember what it's called anymore either, like certificate of merit or something. Like things that lots of people do, but I just wanted them to know that I played piano, and I just put them in those sections under there. So it's super at the bottom of the application, not that important, but if they see it and think it's cool, then like bonus points, right? And lastly, the essay section. So I'll get into the Stanford specific supplements later. I have some examples here. I like Facebook messaged my friends and was like, hey, do you guys have Stanford essays I can look at? But essentially there's 1 short essay and 1 long essay. And the 1 short essay is specific to like an activity that you do that you think is very important. So you should write some activity here that is within the realm of the niche that you're filling out for yourself. So I was filling myself out as like a writing person who writes about like opinion articles about things I care a lot about. So I wrote about the literary magazine that I founded because that fit very nicely in line. I have friends who wrote about like, it wasn't like math club, but it was like they started an after school program to tutor students in low income areas in math. And while they were really good at math in general, they didn't want to write about that time I won that national competition, because you can't get super unique through that. You can't be like, my like heart stopped and I was so excited, all my hard work paid off. That's very cliche, and it's not something that they can't see through your application when they see that award that you want. So you really want to elaborate on something that they can't see through your application already. And that's why this is the last thing that admission officers read. It's because essays are the most subjective thing about the entire application, and it's really where you get to let your personality show through in a way that they couldn't really see before. So I really caution against writing about that time you won that competition or that time you scored really well on that test. Write about something that they wouldn't see through your application in another way, and write about something where they can see like what kind of person you are. So like, are you a funny person? Are you a serious person? Like, what sort of things do you do? So I wrote about, like, for example, the literary magazine for the short essay. For the long essay, you can write about literally whatever you want. I showed you those 5 generic essay topics, but they're so broad that you can really write about whatever you want. I wrote about a time in 8th grade where I decided to donate my hair to Locks of Love, you know, the thing where you like cut off like 10 inches of your hair and it gets made into wigs, and it went really badly. So like my mom was supposed to cut off my ponytail, but she had angled her scissors wrong and like cut my hair diagonally, and it was like a nightmare when you're a middle school girl and your hair is literally diagonal. So I wrote about having to get over that experience, like that embarrassment, and how it like changed me as a person or whatever, and like who I am like now as a result. So how I had to get over trying to control all aspects of my life and become more spontaneous, and how that like has helped shape the kind of person I am today. So it had nothing to do with an award I won or anything, but I think it showed like a side of my personality about how I'm becoming more spontaneous and like letting go, and I talked about the more spontaneous things I do with my time now and let them see like what kind of person I was. And in the Stanford admission essay that the little letter that they write you when you get accepted that I mentioned before, my admission officer said that they loved my piece on the hair because it showed like a spunky, spontaneous side of my personality that they thought fit in really well with Stanford's culture. So it was something that matters a lot, but doesn't have to be another opportunity for you to brag about yourself. One of my friends literally just wrote about like driving away from high school and the experience after like being in school all day for 7 hours and then just driving home at the end of the day, and he made it like really poignant. Other friends write about write about like the time you failed too and just what you learned from it. All you really want here is for them to see one of your experiences, what your personality is, and how you've changed as a result of whatever experience or whatever thing you're writing about to like who you are today.
Who all should you invite to review your essay and give the feedback?
Sure. So I don't know how many of your children have older siblings, but I had an older sister who I thought was like very good at writing. Like I said before, like she had gotten into college a couple years earlier than me. So I had her review my essay just to go over things. I had her also help me brainstorm essay topics. So I wrote my college essays summer before my senior year, which is earlier than most people do it, but senior year you just get really busy and you don't really have time for it, and I don't think that this is something to skimp on in your application. It's really so subjective that it just has to be really good. So I had all my brainstorming happen like the first half of my summer of my senior year, and I spent a lot of time brainstorming because obviously the topic is almost as important as like, no, not really. The topic is important though, but what you do with the topic is also like very important. So I wanted to make sure I picked a really good topic. So I spent like maybe a month or so picking a topic, and then I spent the next month like actually writing it. Had my sister read it, had my parents read it just to see if it like wasn't ridiculous and only made sense to teenagers. I had my guidance counselor at school read it. I didn't have my English teacher read it, the one who wrote me the recommendation letter, but that was mostly just because I thought that he was really busy. It was just like his personality. I didn't think he would like have time to do it. But I know people who have asked their English teachers to help them read an application. It's nice to do that if you actually know your English teacher though, and not to pop up out of nowhere and be like, hey, let's read my essay. And if you want to hire like maybe outside college consultants to read it too, maybe just like a one-time review, that could also be helpful, but that's like very much up to you. It's more of just, I think, a personal preference of who you trust to be able to read it and see if it's an authentic thing that says something about the kind of person your child is.
For Limburg, I just think talking about the Limburg student, the counselor offered help for can read your essay if you sign up. Do you have you used that service before?
I had my guidance counselor read my essay right when I was almost done with it because the thing about it depends on like what school you're applying for, right? So I know that at least Limburg, and I don't know about the other schools, but most of the schools in like the FUHSD school year, I think mostly target students to go to UCs, which are like great schools, but it wasn't necessarily what I was looking for. So I thought that when they were going to read my application, it was going to be very targeted towards like a UC style approach and things like that, because our entire like 4-year curriculum that they have us do is all angled towards the UC system. It's like make sure you take 3 years of a language because that's what UCs look for, things like that. So I had her look it over at the very end to just provide like little comments here and there, but didn't ask her in the beginning when I was like coming up with ideas. Although it was my guidance counselor who helped me come up with one of my Stanford admission topics for like the 3 specific essays Stanford makes you write. I was talking to her about how I was having a really hard time with one of them, and she gave me the idea for the last one. So it could be helpful, but it just use your judgment on whether or not the advice is good.
Who's the
So they're all good. Like I don't think there's one in specific. My last name was T, so I happened to be put in the person with like the last name, so it was like Melissa Goldstein, but they're all really, really good, and I don't think it really matters. The guidance counselors there to help you. They're also really nice people, so I suggest using them if you can. So what worked specifically for me was that, like I mentioned before,
Did you say you had to choose 3 topics?
So that's for Stanford admission essays specifically, which I'm going to talk about a little later, and which I should actually get to. So what worked for me is I started really early. So I knew, I think in 9th grade, probably as an influence of my sister, because she was applying for college when I was in 9th grade, that like, oh, I wanted to go to like these certain schools, and I started to think about it really early on. So I got involved in speech and debate. I got involved in that youth council my freshman year. I got involved in writing my freshman year too, although I didn't really start publishing until end of my sophomore, beginning of my junior year. These are all things that sort of build up over time, because if you're going to be like president of, let's say, robotics club or something, there's a lot of people in robotics club. You can't join your junior year and expect to be able to be like a very senior level position later on. And there's also a lot of skills that you learn from these clubs that you can apply in different areas that might be too late to build in time for your college application if you start your junior year. Not to say that you shouldn't start things then. I started that literary magazine my junior year. That was sort of a build-up after I'd done a lot of things and got the courage and really saw something that I thought I could take advantage of and something that would be very useful to students by that time. So I really think just thinking early about what sort of things you want to do, maybe where you want to be by your junior year, is really good motivation to sort of push you through that way. I also talked to a lot of older students about things that they had done, so students that I admired who had gone to schools or like done activities that I thought were really cool, talked to them, saw what their perspective was. And like I said before, I solidified my passion or that little niche that I was going to apply myself within very early on. So I didn't join math club, I didn't join robotics, I didn't do those sorts of things because I knew that those weren't what I was really passionate about, and I had very limited like time and effort in high school, and I wanted to use it to the best of my ability, so didn't bother, although it could have been helpful. And also, I think something that was really valuable was taking initiatives to doing things beyond high school. Because like I said before, no matter how much you excel in high school specific, there's someone in every high school who's excelling, and it's hard to stand out. So doing things like youth council, which was a citywide thing. Debate has national competitions, not just school-wide ones. Starting that literary magazine, which was like just beyond high school itself. They were all very helpful to show that I was taking initiative to do things that weren't just being handed to me by my school. And lastly, like this is such a cliche, but it's really, really easy to burn out in high school when you're taking all these APs and studying for the SAT and doing all your extracurriculars and thinking about all this. And I think just like not obviously stay constantly motivated and committed and just think about like how it's going to pay off in the future. But also like taking some time to relax I think is very valuable. I don't think I really did that in high school, and I was very tired second semester senior year. And same with me like this year. So I was very tired my first 2 years of college at Stanford. Got the internship that I really wanted at Goldman. Worked really hard at Goldman because investment banking has very long hours. Got home middle of August, and I haven't done anything since. Like I just been at home relaxing because junior year of college is gonna be very tiring, and I'm gonna burn out if I don't relax. So I've been like cleaning my room at home and like learning how to cook and like going grocery shopping for my parents and stuff like that, which is just like a nice relaxation point, which I think is sometimes overlooked in this area. And this is the last thing before I get to Stanford specific. So, tips for the college app. Like I said before, I think you should start early. The application I think opens like August 1st, but you can start your essay like way earlier than that. I told you, like, I was done with my essay before senior year of high school started, and that gave me a lot of time to be able to do other parts of my application and to do really well in the clubs that I was committed to, do really well in my classes. Because unless you apply early to a college is still going to see your first semester grades, so you have to make sure those are good too. And what I said before that I think is probably the most useful advice I got was really tell a story with your application. So this is the kind of person I was, and this is what I'm passionate about, this is why I undertook those activities, and this is what I can really bring to your school. Don't just be like, I did this and that and this and this, and I got really good grades, because that doesn't really tell who you are, and it's not a compelling case to any sort of college.
What you do in your summers?
Oh, in high school?
Yeah.
So I actually don't think I utilize my summers that well. I'll talk about that right after I get through this slide. So emphasize, like, once again, like, your uniqueness. So, like, what makes you different from other people? I think just being someone in this area who did, like, a lot of writing and public speaking was interesting because, like, especially for Stanford, they get tons of applications from Silicon Valley, and a lot of these people want to go into tech or want to go into math. So it's just, like, even, like, geographically, I stood out. I have friends who, like, are from, like, what... It's especially like, okay, so this is like kind of, I feel like a little sad that this is true, but it's true that, like, if you're Asian, right, and if you're an Asian guy, they sort of expect you to be a math and science person, which isn't a problem. Like, if you're really good at that, go ahead. But if you want to apply to MIT as like a math major, as a Chinese or an Indian boy or something, it's very hard. Like, just straight up, it's much harder than if you were something else. So if you're passionate about that, like, by all means, go ahead, but just know that these things also play a factor. And maybe subconsciously, they don't mean to say, like, you're an Indian boy, I don't want you, but what they mean is that it's just when you're applying with a bunch of people with very similar backgrounds, anything that makes you stand out is, like, very, very helpful. So honestly, since I was a girl, if I had done STEM, like science, technology, engineering, and math, that might have been helpful too. I just happened to not be interested in it, so I didn't. So just do whatever you're passionate about, but just know that these things, like, are a factor in any sort of way. And lastly, like I said, like, there are 10 extracurriculars that you're gonna have to fill out, but really focus on a couple that you can make some kind of impact in. Because if you're gonna be president of a club, you want to change the club in some way. If you're gonna be on the board or something, you want to have some kind of impact, right? So be sure that you invest enough time in certain activities that you can really change something and be like, I was here, and this is the legacy that I left to my high school or something. And, like, lastly, I know I probably harped on this a little too much, but don't just do things without, like, thinking about why you're doing them and how it's going to add. So before I go on to, like, the Stanford specific part, what I did after each of my high school summers was, after my freshman summer, I went to debate camp. That was helpful, I guess. I mainly just did it because I wanted to get better at debate. It wasn't like a college application thing or anything. It's fun, you meet people. After my sophomore year, I went to a program at Yale called the Ivy Scholars Program. I think it's called Young Global Scholars now, though. And it's like a very liberal or artsy sort of thing. My program was on American democratic and political thought. I would hesitate towards saying do any, like, summer program in the world out there, because there's so many, and a lot of them are like pay $5,000 for like a week sort of thing. So be very careful. I happen to know that this program is, like, pretty selective, so if you get into it, it's somewhat of, like, an indication. I didn't really know when I was applying if colleges knew what this program was, but apparently they do, because my admission officer knew what it was. So things like that. I went to debate camp after my sophomore year too. After my junior year, I applied for a lot of things and actually didn't get a lot of them, so I was pretty bummed out about it. So I spent a lot of the time writing my essays. I taught writing at, like, this tutoring, like, summer camp thing for a lot of students, and that's pretty much all I did, actually. I don't think I used my junior year summer very productively. I would say for your summers, if you can go to, like, a really prestigious camp, that's really good. So ones in, like, the humanities are, like, the Yale one I went to. The most prestigious one is the Tailor Association Summer Program, TASP, there's a sophomore specific one called TAS. I don't know what it stands for. Those are really prestigious. Like, I was a finalist for those programs and didn't get it, but even being a finalist added something to my application because you have to write 6 very long essays to even get past the first round. So it's similar to my sister's like history essay. Like, it wasn't published by the time she had applied, but just doing that showed something about your application, and making it to the final round was like valuable, even though like I wish I made it to the actual like program itself.
Yeah, you mentioned about the speech and debate camp you went to before. Which one do you recommend?
To get better at debate,
Yeah.
VBI, Victory Briefs Institute, and NSD, National Symposium for Debate, are the most famous ones, as in like most of the best debaters go to those camps. But a lot of debate, and this is very specific debate, is just like it's very connection driven, so like you can win rounds if you know the judges and stuff, so it's good for connection building. But if you actually want like good instruction, there's a lot of camps for that. You can go to the Stanford one, Stanford National Forensics Institute. Like I think those are the 3 main ones. Those are 3 main ones.
Can you repeat the first 2 that you mentioned?
Oh, how many kids here do debate? Victory Briefs Institute, VBI.
Can you write down on the whiteboard? Yeah.
If you look up VBI, you'll find it though. It's like VBI. If you look up VBI and the word debate after it, like, guaranteed you'll find it. And NSD. This one was in Colorado. I think it's in Minnesota now. This one is places in like Chicago and in LA and things like that. So I actually have friends who teach at these camps too. So it's a fun time, but it is very stressful and very tiring.
Do you recommend the sequence going to this camp?
No, they're all done by like level. So if you're, let's say, at NSD and you've never debated before, they'll put you in the beginner class with like other people your age and your demographic and stuff.
What is this third one?
Oh, it's Stanford, so it's called Sniffy. This one's not as nationally known, so it's primarily local students who go to it. So a lot of people from like presentation or Parker and stuff go to these camps, I think, but it doesn't have a national presence. But it also depends on what kind of debate you do. Debate's like a very complex thing that I don't think we really have time to get into, but if you want to do more local style debate, it's this one. The local style being like the ones where like parents judge you and stuff like that, this camp is probably best. If you want to do one where like it's the very fast talking kind of debate and people like move very quickly and you have like college students judging you and stuff, those 2 are better. So
Anything about, do you know about science summer camps?
yeah, so RSI is one of the most like extremely prestigious. I don't actually know what it's called. Research Science Institute? Yeah, something like that. Super prestigious. If you can get that one, like, golden. If there's another one called SIMMER, that's more specific to medicine. So the Stanford Institute of Medical Research. People who do that camp, I know a lot of them who ended up going to Stanford and a lot of them who ended up going to Yale and Harvard and things like that.
SIMR?
Yeah, SIMMER. SIMR. There's the Young Scholars Program at UC Davis, YSP, that I think a lot of people also go to. There's one called SSP. I can't remember what it stands for. Maybe Summer Science Program or something, but SSP, if you look up science program high school student, you'll find it. That one's also pretty prestigious. Also, there's some camps that you get into by virtue of like doing really well on an exam, right? So like if you do really well on it's the AMY, then you can like make MOP, and if you do really well on MOP, you get to go to that like MOP camp that's like in Colorado or something, where all the best math students go. But that one you just have to do really well in math competitions to get there. There's also, I know a lot of people do Cosmos, which is like the ones funded by the UC system. I think going to Cosmos says a lot in terms of like, oh, like I am doing science research in my summer, but I think a lot of people go to Cosmos, so if you want to make that one worthwhile, you should pursue that project, whatever science project you take advantage of there, like after your summer internship is over too. I know a lot of people who also spend their time interning with Stanford professors or Stanford PhD students and helping them with research. A ton of people from Limbrook who became like semi-finalists or finalists in Intel science competition, what they do is they intern with like a PhD student over the summer in the science, like Stanford medical department or Stanford whatever department, help them on their research, do a science project, get a rec letter from that Stanford professor, and then they do really well in those competitions. So that's also worth it. There was someone at my school who did really well in science competitions, like got into everywhere, did incredibly well. She went to Cosmos, and like I said before, like she pursued her project afterwards and stayed in contact with that professor, and her project turned into something really incredible, and that showed through as well. So unless there are any more questions, like I tend to run over time. I talk a lot, so.
And you also a good writing competition.
Oh, writing competitions. There's one called Scholastic Arts and Writing Competition. That one's very famous. That one's that's actually all art. So you can do like essays for that one. You can do poetry. You can do photography. You can do, I think, even music. There's also like the Young Arts Foundation that's very famous for similar reasons. There's the, I don't know if this is still happening. These are all ones that existed when I was back in the time. Those two I'm sure still exist, but this one, Letters About Literature, it's a US government sponsored one actually, where you like write a letter to your favorite author about like your favorite book or something. That one's also very well known. What other ones are there? Honestly, essay competitions are pretty easy to find though if you like search online. You just have to see like how prestigious they are. There's the JFK's Profiles in Courage one. If you win, you like meet the Secretary of State or something. And that one you just like write about a local official. There's a ton. I did one called the National Peace Essay Competition, sponsored by the United States Institute of Peace, where they give you like a topic. Mine was on like social media and the Egyptian revolutions in 2010, and they like write about something very specific to that as well. So, and if you win, you like get flown to DC, things like that. Okay, Stanford application. What most people said they wanted to hear about. So, Stanford review process has 2 readers, potentially a third. I don't actually know how the breakdown, like I don't know if it's like a local reader and then like a national reader or what happens there, but this is just because I happen to see my Stanford app. And then they have like these categories that they sort of rank you in. The first being tests, so very generic SAT sort of stuff. High school records, so high school records like AP classes, I think grades count in there too. I'm actually not sure if grades go in which category, but you get the point. AP classes, this is actually what I was talking about when I said like I don't think they were too impressed by the fact that I'd only taken 3 APs after my junior year, because I didn't score super well in that category. But I don't also think it matters, because what the guidance counselor does is they tell the schools what that school, or they tell the colleges what that specific high school has available. So for Lynbrook, for example, you're not allowed to take APs until your junior year. That's written in the guidance counselor letter of rec. They have little buttons that they have to fill out so that they know that it wasn't that I was like being lazy or wasn't able to handle it. I was literally not allowed to. Lynbrook, you're also not allowed to take 2 science classes at the same time, also written in the application, so that they're very well aware of it. So even though I didn't score super well in this category, I don't think it ended up mattering because they knew that I was limited by what my school had to offer.
They still give you a low score on that one?
Not like a low score, but not like the highest score. But it didn't like factor in when I was like reading the little like messages they write. They don't say like, oh, her classes weren't good enough. I think it was just a very generic thing, but then they take into account your situation. So like my freshman year roommate went to a school that didn't have APs, so like there's no way she's going to be able to take an AP test or take an AP class if there were no APs. But I assume she didn't score very well in that category, but she still got into Stanford. Like it's all very context dependent.
How about, do you recommend kids taking AP classes like in Dianza or?
Oh yeah, so I don't actually know how helpful that is. I did that, so I took like a general psychology course at West Valley, just because I wanted to like show that I was taking like extra classes. I don't think that was helpful at all for me specifically, because I didn't take the AP Psych exam in the end. Maybe like, for example, if you're constrained by the number of classes you can take, so if you wanted to do like AP US History, AP World History, and AP Euro History, but you can't take all those classes at your high school in that period of time, maybe doing one of them like at a local community college and then taking an AP test would be helpful. I think the benefit is kind of marginal though, so if you can do it without that much effort, maybe do it, but don't like consider it like one of your extracurriculars that you have to spend that much time on, because they know that you're constrained by like what your school has. Like I had people who took like Chem Honors, AP Bio, then AP Physics, sophomore, junior, senior year, but also took like the Chem AP test because they just wanted to show that they could pass it and they were applying as a science person. So like that maybe makes sense, but I don't think taking like a completely different class just to show is that helpful. Yeah?
But to check, for the one that high school, that the AP classes, the note not so great and you know you got a fair record, does that mean all the Lynbrook applicants get that same note?
So I didn't see other people's applications, so I can't say for sure. My guess is yes. So I guess I could have taken like one more AP class. I could have taken like AP Computer Science or something maybe and gotten another APs. I know a lot of people who took APs their sophomore year for like all the honors classes that they were taking. People who take like calculus their sophomore year as well, things like that. And maybe that would help them. But I think for me, the marginal, like the effort of doing that wasn't worth like the time trade-off of me doing the other things that I was doing. So yes, like take hard classes. Don't only take like 2 APs, maybe your whole senior year if you want to go to a really top tier school. But I don't think it's something to like agonize over. I think it's pretty well established that most schools, like what classes people who get into the schools you want to get into take. And like it seems like a well-trodden path, so. And then letters of rec, non-academic, so that's like your extracurriculars, and then something called intellectual vitality, which I actually think makes Stanford like very, very, very different, is that intellectual vitality is something that they ask you to write about in one of the 3 Stanford supplemental essays, and that means it's something very specific to Stanford. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later, but just know that this is the way at least I was ranked. They've destroyed all admission records since because they were really unhappy that people got to read their admission file. So I don't know if they're changing their process at all, but I doubt it because that's a pretty large logistical and organizational change. And I'm pretty sure that even if it's not going to be these exact things by the time your student applies, it's very similar. Like I said before, admission officers are human. These are very logical things to fall under. So the Stanford supplemental application, how many of you have actually seen it before? Like, I don't know if anyone has students who are seniors who are applying to college. Okay, so there are 3 Stanford supplemental essays. The first one, they all give people a huge pain. So, like we said before, like every college is most likely going to require like 1 essay. So like that general essay I wrote mine about hair, it's in the Common App. But a lot of them also require like additional ones. Yale requires you write just like 1 more, and it can be about any subject. Princeton has like a couple of topics they want you to write about. Harvard actually has like an optional, so you don't really have to submit anything else except the Common App, but a lot of people submit a supplemental essay, just things like that. Columbia has like 3 specific ones too, but Stanford's is the longest. And I think the reason why is because I don't like Stanford has this reputation for being like very entrepreneurial, right? Like people come in, they have a lot of great ideas, they start companies, they do really big things. And I think a large part of it is because of the way the Stanford admission process works. So like I said before, a lot of the East Coast schools have very short supplementals where you can write like maybe 1 more essay or answer a couple of short answers. But that's a pretty broad topic, right? Like Stanford has 3 very specific essays that they want you to write about along with short answers. And that makes me think that the Stanford supplement must be super important because there's a reason why they're doing it, and there's a reason why Stanford students have the tendency to be very entrepreneurial and come up with a lot of like big ideas and start companies and all that stuff. So they care a lot about like these very intangible things like passion, creativity, having something a little bit different. And I think that's what they define as like intellectual vitality. So that one section where they ask about that in like that little like numbered list thing. And that's very, very hard to define, and nobody knows what it means. But you just have to try and show that you are an intellectually vital person. And I think that not only comes through the activities you do, so did you take initiative to do something a little bit different, but also through the essays that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. Also, just like demographic-wise, I know that Stanford is having a problem right now because there are too many people majoring in computer science. And it's just like people come in as like some major, any major that they apply for, and then they switch into computer science like their first quarter. So that's a problem because there are too many people majoring in it, but they don't want to limit the number of people, but it's really making the school very imbalanced. So they're definitely having some kind of effort to like limit computer science students, not to say they're not going to accept someone who's really good at computer science. And if you're like a woman doing computer science, for example, very valued right now. But I wouldn't say that like if you want to do computer science, that necessarily applying as a computer science major at Stanford is going to get you in because there's so many people doing that. So like that's just something to take in consideration, similar to what I said before about like the demographic issue and just like putting yourself in context of the other students who are applying. They're also really trying to build up their arts and humanities school. So like my year at Stanford, I got in from like Limbrook. One student who really wanted to do medicine got in. One girl who was an excellent writer, like English major, everything, she got in. And then one student who was amazing at art got in. So you can sort of see from that demographic the kinds of students that maybe they're like looking towards. Oh, and one girl who's really good at science got in. She didn't go though, so I forgot. But yeah, just things like that. So I do think that it's very, very important just to make sure that the supplements for any school, but especially Stanford, is very important because of how long it is. So this is the Stanford short answer section that existed when I was applying. I also, again, maybe it's different. I don't think so, but I am not positive. These, I think you should take very, very casually. Like, don't agonize over these. I made the mistake when I was applying for every school that had short answers like this. I would spend forever being like, what do they want to hear? Like, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's pretty obvious now that I look back from, like, a more distant lens that they're not really looking for anything in specific. Like, these questions are just want to see the kind of personality you are, right? It's not what do they want to see, it's what sort of thing, like, do you want to show them you are. So respond in 2 lines or less. There's really nothing profound you can say. I have friends who, she was my roommate who was like really good at music. They asked about like her favorite books, authors, films, and or musical artists, and she like wrote in all caps with a lot of exclamation points about like everything because she was just so enthusiastic. And I would never have dared to do that because it's like a pretty bold move in my opinion. But apparently like they really liked that and they wrote that in her application. They loved the enthusiasm that she showed. She put like the word Chopin in all caps with like 3 exclamation points, which is really funny, but it's like a personality trait, right? It's something that they can see is like, it's also kind of a gutsy move, and I think they probably think she's a pretty brave person because how many people would dare do that? Like, what newspapers, what's the most significant challenge? All things that I think you should just answer very honestly, but obviously don't show like a side of yourself you don't want to be seen. So don't put something like scandalous as your favorite book or favorite magazine. Don't say something like illegal for like how did you spend your last 2 summers, like things like that. But I think they're pretty, like they're casual questions. It's probably like even a break for the admission officer to just see something fun. So I don't know if there's any specific questions for these. I don't think they're something methodical or something you need to calculate. I think it's a time for your students to just show the kind of person they are.
The 5 words that Miss described, that's pretty important.
Yes, but like I said, like some people that I knew, so there's actually this funny thing, like once you get into a college, there's like a Facebook page that you can join and all the admitted students are in it and it's pretty fun. So people are like, what did you put for your best like 5 favorite words? And a lot of people put like very generic things, so like brave, hardworking, motivational, things like that. Like this question's not gonna like make or break your application. They're not gonna be like, wow, they put hardworking. I'm not gonna let them in, it's too generic. But if you say something cool, that can be cool. So oh my god, my bag. He went to my high school, he was in my grade. So like 5 best words that describe you. I had some people who like made up their own words and like created definitions, so they like smashed 2 words together. I think that's a little cheesy, but like I guess it worked. Some people like made sentences out of it, like a 5-word sentence, just like anything really. I don't think it's a make or break thing. So like I said before, for any essay, you really just want to show the kind of person you are and something that they can't see through the activity section or the awards you've won. So Stanford, because they have such a long admission essay, really wants to see that sort of personality quirk that you have. So the first Stanford essay asks, Stanford students possess an intellectual vitality. That's what I said before, like no one knows what that means. Reflect on an idea or experience that has been important to your intellectual development. And you have about 2,000 characters, which is maybe like 300 words. So it's a very short essay, and you really gotta get to the point. So this essay causes people a lot of trouble because no one knows what intellectual vitality is and no one knows what admission officers want to see. I, like a couple days ago, just asked some of my friends what they'd written about. So one of my friends wrote about just like selflessness and how she had to learn about selflessness and it's like its importance or whatever. Someone wrote about how success only comes to like those who reach for it, but made it much less cheesy. So it was sort of written in like a timeline frame. They talked about 6th grade and like a little paragraph about how they were in 6th grade, like 9th grade a little paragraph about how they were, 11th grade a little paragraph, and then 12th grade like all of a sudden like who they are now sort of thing. So pretty interesting format. One of my friends went to like a robotics summer camp at MIT and just wrote about his experience there and how he like learned a lot about who he was. Some people just write about like books, so like a book that like changed their life, things like that. So I think the topic you choose is obviously very important because it's essentially where you get to where you score points in that like intellectual vitality category, right? So you don't want to choose like again something about winning a competition and how it was like the best feeling in the entire world. You want to show about how you're able to perceive something a little differently than other people see it. So my friend gave me his essay, so I'm just gonna read it. I didn't put it up online because or up on the PowerPoints. I don't think he wants people taking photos of it. So this is the one about the success only comes for those who reach for it.
And this guy got into Stanford?
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. He was in New York last summer. He interned at the same place that one Kai over there did a couple of summers ago. So 6th grade. The director was on the computer when I approached the office. I was tired of playing the flute. I wanted to try something different, maybe the French horn, but it was already late in the year and I wasn't sure the band teacher would let me switch. I was a bit anxious about asking. I shouldn't have picked the flute in the first place. I'd wanted to play trumpet, but my parents didn't like the idea and I didn't dare oppose them. I lifted a fist, tentative, unsure. 9th grade. I dawdled outside room 2212 for a long time, scared to open the door, to walk into a room full of brilliant upperclassmen wondering what a freshman was doing in their midst. What a kid who stood a mere 5'5" could possibly have to contribute to their science Olympiad team. I remember the first time I tried to join such an activity in middle school, looking into the science club, seeing a room full of girls, panicking, leaving. My hand hovered, suspended for a second between my comfort zone and the mystery beyond. I reached for the door. 11th grade. My heart skipped a beat, then another. I was trembling slightly as I got out of the car, clutching a rose. I hesitated, my hand inches from the door. It was perfectly worked out. Will you go to homecoming with me? 7 words. Inhale, exhale. My finger inched towards the doorbell. Today, I am first French horn in the symphonic orchestra. I have captained the science Olympiad team for 2 years running, and I remain close friends with the girl I took to homecoming junior year. What I've learned over the years, the driving idea behind my development, is that success only comes to those who reach for it, that it never hurts to try, that there's no room for doubt. The more doors you knock on, the more will open. And so, no matter how uncertain I may feel, when I find myself in front of a door, I grit my teeth, raise a fist, and knock. So you can see what I mean, like he didn't write about, like he was really good at science, like really good at music. I don't know how he was at like asking girls out, but he didn't like write about that time he like won the science competition. He wrote about in a very interesting like chronological order who he like was before and like how tentative he was and how he wasn't sure how he really wanted to leave, and then just like skipped 2 lines and then a new paragraph and it was like, today I am this, and like this is what I've learned from the experience. So if you can sort of see like what I mean when I say just something that's like shows a different side of you or something that is different that other people wouldn't necessarily do. I think that like for him, he didn't like write about, like he just wrote about the activities, right? Like things that they could see on their application, but he wrote about his experience going through them in a way that you can't just see through the application. Like you're not gonna see when you're like first French horn in the symphonic orchestra how worried he was in 6th grade about it and how he sort of had to get over that fear sort of thing.
But he could have done that in the common essay also.
Yeah, like the common essay is like the common essay you can write about really anything you want, so like I think any of these could sort of be substituted in there, but in his common essay he had written about something different and wanted to show this part of his application as supplemental. But yes, I think that you want to be intellectually vital in your common app essay as well, so they presumably could be interchangeable, except that the common app is much longer than this essay would be. The next Stanford essay is a letter to your roommate, and it's just virtually all Stanford's undergraduates live on campus. Write a note to your future roommate that reveals something about you or that will help your roommate and us know you better. So this is also really stressful to a lot of people because they're like, oh my god, like, should I mention the fact that I never clean my room and that like I like put posters of like, I don't know, Superman everywhere or something like that. But I also think that like this essay is just really a chance for you to really showcase your personality in a very different way. So one of my friends, all she did was just write about how much she loved the LA Lakers and like how she was going to be so excited about Stanford sports and was going to be like the person in the front row like screaming, and how she hoped they liked sports or else they would have nothing to talk about sort of thing. So it was just like an interesting like funny personality thing. It made her cute. They like knew she was going to be screaming in the front rows of the Stanford football games. A couple of my other friends just wrote about watching TV and like her favorite TV shows and why she liked all her TV shows. Someone created like a little story for himself where he spoofed Mission Impossible and pretended that like his life was Mission Impossible. That was like, I think, also very bold. It was obviously well done, but don't just be like, I am James Bond, or is that even Mission Impossible? I don't even know. That's not the same thing. But anyway, like, you get what I mean. Someone else just like talked about a very casual letter about like what he enjoys talking about, like his favorite things, how he has a very strange sleep schedule and he'll probably be wandering around the campus at 3 a.m. thinking about life, sort of thing. I personally wrote about how much I liked socks. So I had this like phase in high school, I don't know why, but I was just like really into funny socks. So I had like those socks with like the 5 little toe things where you like put each one of your toes in the sock, and I had a lot of fluffy ones, like knee-length ones and striped ones. So like I just wrote about my socks and how I thought like my socks like match my personality, and I'll read it for you a little later, but you get what I mean. Like, this is a very, very casual essay. Like I think that what you should focus on is making sure that the child does not sound like somebody that would scare away their roommate. So like you could probably do that by being like, I don't know,
Study all the time.
yeah, like I will probably be in my room studying a lot, or like I'm probably never going to be in my room because I'm planning on enjoying like Stanford's new social scene and frat parties and things like that. Like, they don't want to see you there. They want to sort of picture what you're going to be like in your dorm room on a Tuesday night, sort of thing. So most of my friends that I asked about this essay were like, I didn't write about anything specific. I just wrote about like literally who I was. I was like, I did this in high school, but like this is my favorite kind of food, and like I go to this restaurant all the time with my parents, things like that. Just like very casual. They want to see like who you are as a person. So I've actually never read one of my essays out loud. I didn't really want to do it when I was younger, but now I feel like it doesn't really matter. So which one is it? Oh. So it's just like letter to your roommate. So I wrote, "Dear future roommate, when we move in together, one thing you should know probably is that I love socks. The number of socks I own, quite frankly, is embarrassing, and I plan on wearing my eclectic pairs around our dorm every day. My collection currently includes day of the week socks, which I've never worn on the wrong day before, striped knee-length toe socks that I bought at a debate tournament in Minnesota, and Santa socks with protruding hands and feet that I got from my school literary magazine, Secret Santa. I think I have enough socks to wear for an entire month without repeating. For some reason, people keep giving me them, so my collection won't stop growing. I know socks may seem like boring and impersonal gifts to a lot of people, but to me they're full of character. When the holidays roll around, my Santa socks will add a splash of festivity to our final setting, and on Halloween, my candy corn socks will highlight the elaborate Halloween costume I'll almost certainly be wearing. Warm days will welcome an influx of short button socks, while cold nights will see a whirlwind of fluffy, knee-length, and woolen socks all at once, worn together to provide maximum insulation. When it comes down to it, my socks are a little bit like me. Lighthearted and colorful, but practical and different depending on the situation. Sometimes they can be dramatic and intense, sometimes quiet and mellow, and sometimes vibrant and exciting. Oh. But in the end, they almost always certainly make a statement. And ultimately, whether you're a fuzzy, toe, or normal white sock kind of person, I look forward to meeting you and having our first roommate outing together, maybe to the gift shop to buy some Stanford socks. Here's to a great year together, Kimberly." And then P.S. My friends call me Kimberly, Kim, Kimmy, K-Tan, Kimbo Slice, and K-Tizzle. Choose whichever one you'd like. So it was like, it's a super like casual essay. It's like a little bit embarrassing to read, but I actually thought a lot about this one because I couldn't figure out like what to really write about, right? It's like really hard to say what kind of person you are through like a letter to your roommate, which your roommate's like never gonna actually read. But I think I just wanted to showcase like my personality and like who I was, and I thought a good way to do that would be like through a metaphor through my socks. And I thought that also fit in kind of well with my essay, just because my first topic, like I've written about a book about people's everyday lives and how that book like really inspired me to see like extraordinary things in ordinary people's lives. And I thought this was something that could add on to that sort of personality to create a better story for myself, right? It's like I can see like meaning or see like something in something as ordinary as socks, something like that. So it like adds to the narrative, it makes sense with the kind of person I'm portraying myself in the application. Yeah, so I wrote about my socks. My other friend, like the one whose essay I just read you, he didn't write about like anything in specific. He literally just said like, "My name's Mike, I am a pretty laid back person. I value communication a lot, and I really like fashion and soccer. Like, it was just who he was as a person, something he didn't get a chance to showcase in his application.
But that's it.
Well, like, that's not the only thing he wrote. I sort of paraphrased it. But it, like, there wasn't any specific theme. Mine had a theme about socks, and I think I liked the theme because I think it worked well for who I was. But some people, like, don't really have a theme. They just write about who they are. Some people write all about sports. Some people write about, like, all these things up there. It's so broad. They just want to make sure that you're, like, not going to scare your roommate away. And in the Stanford admission essay that I got, where they, like, my admission officer wrote to me, she, like, had written all this stuff, and she was like, P.S. I like Kate Tizzle the best. So, like, she, like, thought that little line, I guess, about, like, nicknames about myself was funny. I don't know. But, yeah. And then the last Stanford essay is what matters to you and why. And it's still, like, only maybe 350 words. And this essay is, I think, a time to, like, really show them, like, what your values are. So they can see, like, all the accomplishments that you had and how great you are, what your personality is, but, like, this essay gives them a chance to see, like, on a fundamental level, like, what's important to you, right? Like, who are you at a base level? So I had friends that had written about, like, his mom, like, drives him to work, drives him to school. So, like, the morning car rides where he goes to school every day in the morning, like, how it's like she's really busy at work, so it's the one time he really gets to connect with her. Someone wrote about how he was really shy when he was in high school and had to join speech and debate like forces you to talk in front of other people you don't know about things you don't know anything about, and like how that sort of helped him find his own voice and the importance of doing that. One of my friends wrote about literally just fashion and how his style and the things he wears, and he dresses in a really unique fashion, is very important to him as a part of his identity. So even though he wears something that a lot of people would never wear, like why that matters to him and why he refuses to change his fashion style. One of my friends just wrote about piano and how piano was like really important to her. She's the one who got the letter from like the music department about how good she was at piano. So she just wrote about how important piano was to her, and when she got an injury when she was playing piano, like she got tendonitis or something, like how she couldn't play for a while and like how harmful that was. I wrote about food. So I wanted to be a little lighthearted again. So it wasn't just about food. I didn't say like I like love, and I just like list out my favorite food. But I sort of wrote about how the experience of food and like cuisines, like how it ties into culture, and like the staple foods my family eats and how it brings us all together, sort of thing. So it still had a purpose in the end. It said a lot more than just food, but I think I did it in like a different route than most people do. So I feel like this topic is very easy to get very like stereotypical in, like what matters to you. I feel like a lot of people can be like, my health matters to me, my family matters to me, like free time matters to me, like doing what I love matters to me, but those are very, very generic. And you gotta imagine how many admissions letters there, or how many admission essays they're reading that have these topics. So it needs to be like a little special, right? You can't just say, my family's like been so supportive of me this whole time, like everything I've wanted to do, they've always been behind my back. That's probably like true, and that's probably wonderful and great. Good job, always support your family, but there's so many people who are going to write about that I don't think it's something that's going to stand out. It's not necessarily going to be something that they're going to like throw your application away for, but you want each one of these essays to be a reason to accept you, like not just a reason to reject you, so, or a reason to not reject you. So as a result, I think it should be something a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to read my food essay. I don't know, so I don't know if anyone's like recording it right now, but if you are recording, please don't, because these, I don't know, these are my college essays. They're pretty personal things, and I thought a lot about whether or not I wanted to really read them out loud. So if you already recorded the roommate one, like whatever, I guess I forgot to mention it, but these are personal. So so I begin every day with a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios and a slice of wheat bread. My favorite dish is Chinese chili chicken, but my favorite cuisines are Mexican and Italian. I eat at Chipotle so often that the store manager knows my name. I have never had sushi. Even my MacBook computer, which has the iconic bitten apple on the cover, has a sticker of a whole apple on the left, an apple core on the right, and 2 C's at the end. Food matters to me. For over 10 years, my family's had a tradition of camping with 3 other families on Labor Day weekend. Every year we make shrimp and avocado lettuce wraps at sunset, and every year we remember to bring the marshmallows to roast over the fire, but forget to bring the graham crackers needed to make s'mores. With over a decade of memories, I've forgotten the names of the campfires we've been to, the scenes we've enjoyed, and even just our general location. But I remember the food. The peppered steak we spent hours grilling over the fire, the lettuce wraps we prepared amidst laughter and rumbling stomachs, and the late-night snacks we consumed while in a penguin huddle around the crackling fire. Food is chained to life in a fundamental way. The act of chewing, swallowing, and sharing are all inextricably tied to the culture, family, and community we live in. When I visit my grandparents in China, I'm always welcomed with a steaming plate of fried fish. After my sister returns home from college, our first dish together is always the Chinese chicken at Da Sichuan on El Camino. And when I'm camping, it's really good, right? And when I'm camping, washing heads of lettuce to make the wraps becomes so much more than just feeling the rush of cold water beneath my fingertips. Regardless of the occasion, whether it happens every day or once a year, sharing a meal forms bonds that linger long after the meal is over, a testament to the continuity of memory and people that food brings together. It's true what they say, man cannot live by bread alone. So it's like about food, but not really about food, right? I didn't just like write about how I loved like Lazi, but I wrote about like how food was really, I thought, like a means to bring people together and a way in which like important memories that I have were formed. Similar to I think what I did with socks, where I used socks as a medium to like describe my personality, but it wasn't done in I think as cliche of a way where people just say like memories are important or family is important to me or things like that. It was done in like a little bit of a different route. My friend who wrote about fashion, oh yeah. Again, like this is his essays and I don't think he would like it if people were recording it as well, so please don't. I wear clothes. Clothes do not wear me. Dress is the first impression we make, even before we open our mouths to speak. Unfortunately, the runway has become the ultimate trendsetter, turning thousands of fashionistas into clones, all sporting identical trends, undermining the very institution of individuality that fashion ought to be. While I will watch and take note, I refuse to follow the norms purely to fit in. Personal style is, to me, the ultimate form of self-expression, and I have taken great care to find a style that is my own. The cuffed skinny jeans, sunglasses, and bracelets. My style is how I present myself to the world. It runs deeper than just looking good. Although I will from time to time take an idea I like from magazines, I refuse to conform, and I will not just be a reflection of shows and catwalks and trends, altering my wardrobe at the whim of a designer I've never met. What matters to me is the retention of my own identity, not only in thought, but in dress and in character and in principle. I refuse to allow myself to be fundamentally changed solely by the opinions of others. The deliberate uniqueness of my style is reflective of the distinctiveness of my reasoning. I'm resolute in my beliefs, but always aware and open to the viewpoints of others. I debate mathematical impossibilities with my psychology teacher, question the nuances of trumpets with my fellow section leaders, and avidly argue against increased liquidity in the American economy with my classmates. My style of dress echoes my mindset, one that will not be controlled by forces around me. I move forward, hopefully smarter, more articulate, and better dressed, but still with sunglasses on my face and steel on my wrist. So like similarly, he wrote about clothes, right? He cares a lot about fashion, he really does. So this is a very genuine essay, but he still wrote about like how it ties into like his own identity and how fashion speaks to more than just wearing clothes, but how it speaks to how he presents himself to the world and how he goes about doing things in his everyday life. So, and he also ties in things like, oh, his psychology teacher, section leaders, how he plays the trumpet, the American economy, how he's passionate about economics, in a similar way to how I tied in like debate and like my Secret Santa socks in like my sock essay. So I still talked about things that I did, but the focus of my essays wasn't what I did in high school. It was something else about my personality and character. So I know something that people always want to know is like, what can families do? And honestly, like, there's not a great answer. I don't think being a helicopter parent's like a great idea because it's like, first of all, there's a lot of stress and pressure on your parents. My parents were never like helicopter parents. They always like, if I like maybe got straight B's one semester, they'd like freak out. But as long as you're okay, they were okay too. So like I said before, like schools just really want somebody who's like truly passionate and is able to convey that passion through the activities that they did in high school and through the essays that they're going to write. And I think that the best way to do that is to figure out like maybe what your student is passionate about. I know there's like some statistic that's like 80% of people aren't really passionate about anything. There's something you're like interested in and something that you want to explore further. And I think that what parents can do is really just be supportive of that and be able to help find opportunities to do that. So like asking about like summer camps is a good example. Like if your student really likes writing, like helping them find summer camps that they can go to, or helping them find like writing competitions to apply for are super helpful. If your student like really likes, I don't know, biology, like trying to see if maybe any of your friends work at a bio company that they can intern at, or helping them find internships. Those are all like very, very helpful things. Like my parents helped me find like a lot of the summer camps that I'd applied to. They were looking for essay competitions while I was looking for essay competitions as well. And it was like very helpful to know that they were there and like they were involved in what I was doing, but wasn't like, why aren't you like studying at this exact time, this exact date? Obviously, like I also like had fairly good study habits already, so that wasn't the biggest deal in the world. But I assume that most students in this area, if you go to a school like Lynbrook, have to have fairly good study habits to survive. So, like I said before, it's like helping them build out what their passion or what their niche is going to be, and finding opportunities is, I really think, the most helpful thing to do. And just this is the last slide before I just go for Q&A, and it's really just everything that I've been saying about 10 times over, which is just really pursue something that you find really passionate. It's going to make high school that much more enjoyable if you do, and it's going to help you make yourself more unique, because everyone's passionate about something slightly different. So if you're able to do that, then you can show how you're going to fit into that campus and how you're going to help build like a well-rounded class, not necessarily be that one well-rounded student in the whole class, because that's not really what they're looking for. Start from freshman year if you can. If you're not a freshman anymore, it's not a huge deal, it's not the end of the world, but just like I said before, things take time to build up. So if you want to do really well in a competition, if you want to be president of a club, those are things that take a couple of years to build up and really build the skills for. So just thinking early about what you want to do and how you might be able to achieve it is super helpful. Also, like doing debate and like thinking about debate a lot helped me then write my essays, which were helpful even though I only applied for essay competitions maybe my junior year. And lastly, what I said before about depth and breadth. So yes, find like one niche or like maybe a couple of areas that you were involved in. So like debate and writing and youth government aren't exactly related to each other, but they're in the same like sphere. They're not 180 degrees from each other. And once you like find that general angle that you want to go for, like building it out from there. So like teaching a class somewhere, going to that summer camp, being an officer of that club, doing that competition, just lots of things within that one niche. And lastly, like really just not only make sure that, I said lastly a lot, but be proactive, like take initiative. Don't just be like, oh, there's that one club at school that I'm going to be president of, and that one teacher I'm going to get to know really well. Because everyone can do that. Like it doesn't show something different about you unless you're able to go beyond what is normal and actually like create your own opportunity or something like that. But while doing all these million things that makes high school super stressful, you have to make sure that your grades and your GPA and your SAT scores are still sufficient, because that's the first level that they look at. So if you don't have if you have a bad GPA, then that might be a reason for them to be like, why look further in the application, right? And then they won't get to see all the amazing things you've done. I don't think a GPA is like necessarily like the end of the world, but it depends on like the school, for example. So a lot of schools, I think a lot of the East Coast institutions take GPA like very, very importantly as well. I think Stanford might take it a little bit less because they have that supplement that they care so much about and are looking for that intellectual vitality, but it's still something that like college is ultimately like an academic institution. They have to know you'll be able to keep up, so just make sure. And that's all I had to say. I'm willing to take any questions or not, whatever's like easier for you guys. Thank you. Yeah? Did I ever do sports? No. I am not athletic. I have a lot of people at Stanford, like more so than I expected to do sports though. Like, so first of all, like Stanford's a really good sports school, so we have a lot of like recruited athletes. Someone from Lynbrook, I think the year below me, so who graduated 2014, is a recruited athlete who does tennis. But it's like very, very hard to get recruited at Stanford because it's like D1. It's like one of the hardest. People who get recruited there tend to go, or at least have the potential to go pro. So I think it's helpful to do sports because they know that sports takes like a certain kind of rigor, so you have to maintain everything else even while you're like physically exhausted, which is very different from like mental and emotional exhaustion. But it's also like a lot about teamwork, and it's a lot about like managing your time when you have practice every single day. But that would just be like one of the 10 things on your extracurricular section. If you were like captain of like the track team, maybe that's like something you put. But it's not necessarily going to be like a make or break it unless you're angling yourself to be sort of like a sports person, I guess. But I think it's good. Also, like healthy. Like I got to Stanford, everyone I know was like on some kind of sports team except me, and now I like feel compelled to go running in the morning and stuff because everyone's so healthy. They all eat kale. So, yeah. Yeah.
How do you find your interest and passion in economics?
Yeah, so I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got to Stanford. I'd angled myself in that sphere, but like obviously once you get to college, if you go to a private school, you can really change majors whenever you want. Like if you go to a UC or a CSU, oftentimes you have to apply to like a specific college. You have to apply to like the letters and sciences or the School of Engineering, and it's hard to switch between those. But private schools generally you can just declare whatever major you want. So I got there and I was like, I know I was interested in this in high school, but maybe it's because I didn't explore something else. So I took like classes in like 12 different subjects my freshman year. I like really just wanted to figure it out and wanted to be sure instead of having like going to junior year and not knowing. So, and then afterwards, like I wasn't sure, like all my classes were interesting and I liked them, but I thought about like what I wanted to do as a career afterwards. And I'm really interested in like finance and business, but also like economic development and international development. That's what I did in Bosnia last summer. And I also like economic policy a lot, so I'm involved in like public policy on campus. And I thought like what is a good foundation for like those three things that I might want to do, and economics was like a very good foundation. And I chose like minor in things that are very quantitative, like math and computer science and statistics. So I think the way the world is going, if I wanted to do economics and be able to analyze data, those are like very important skills to have.
So did you have to declare a particular major in the application, or it just got through the theme that's good enough?
So there's a
Did you have to explain what the theme is?
No, you don't explain the theme. You're not like, this is my theme, but it's something that should come out in your application. Like, it should be very clear what you're doing. So, I mentioned before, I think the Common App is still like this. I'm not positive, but there's a future section where it's like, what do you think you want to be when you grow up? And there's like 3 like options. So, like, you could be like an economist, or you could be a writer and a journalist, or you could be a policymaker. And there's like options that they give you. So I sort of put there that I was thinking of maybe becoming a writer or a journalist, I think. And another one was like maybe an academic or something like that. And then that sort of helps them frame their way of thinking when they look at the rest of my applications, be like, oh, it makes sense why she's like doing all these things. But I also have friends who like, I had one friend who was like a really good debater, and debate was like definitely his thing. He's like at Yale now, but he like didn't really understand. He was just really good at debate, so like any college was gonna take him. But he had put like political science, I think was like an option of what he was able to put, so like political scientist. And then he also like took AP computer science his senior year and thought that was an interesting class, so he put like computer science as his next choice, which like didn't make any sense with the rest of the context of his application. But it wasn't like a killer, right? Because he still like put poli-sci first. Everything he did in his application still made sense. So I think it helps them like figure out what angle you're going towards, but it's just like a reference point.
But for private schools, you don't declare majors or anything.
You don't declare majors, no. I'm trying to, yeah, because the Common App has to be general enough because so many schools have many different majors that there's no way like they can list all the majors. And I don't remember any of my supplements ever asking me to declare a major, no. But if I did, I probably would have said something like English or something like that.
But they don't hold you to it.
They don't hold you to it, no. Like, that's what I said. Like, that's why Stanford's having a problem. It's because so many people get in and then are now computer science majors. Now there's too many. Yeah?
So how many applications do you do? How many schools do you apply to?
Oh, yeah. So, schools I applied to. I applied to all the Ivies but Cornell, and I just didn't apply to Cornell because I like, didn't want to be in Ithaca. It was too cold for me. But like, I have one of my best friends from high school is in Cornell, and she loves it, so there's nothing against that school. I applied to UC Berkeley and UCLA. I applied to UChicago, and I applied to, I think that might be all I applied to, yeah. Because for the UCs, I thought that I like saw a lot of the people who were getting into them, to the UCs around me, and a lot of the smartest students at Lindbergh go to UCs, but my impression was that it's very much like if you have a good enough GPA and like a good enough SAT score and like are active in school, like you have a good chance of getting in. So I thought I had a fairly good chance of getting into a UC, so I did UC Berkeley and UCLA. I might have done San Diego, actually, UC San Diego as well.
So these are your safety backups.
Yeah, I was like fairly confident I'd be able to get into like one UC school, so those were my backups, and I didn't want to apply for a private school that I didn't think was worth it with going to over UCs, because like we're in California. UCs are like the best public school system in the entire country, maybe the world. They're great schools, so I only wanted to apply for ones that I knew would be better. But like I said, like that's very much a personal preference. So it's
Did you visit all the schools you applied for?
not beforehand.
Not before.
A lot of people do. For me, like I kind of knew what schools I wanted to get into before I'd applied, so it didn't make sense for me to make the trip. But for other people, I know a lot of people who like it was very informative for them to decide if they actually wanted to apply or not. So I was deciding. I remember your question from the beginning. In the end, I was mainly deciding between Stanford, Columbia, UChicago, University of Pennsylvania. Like the ones that I visited. So I almost went to Columbia because I like really liked New York City. I was in New York this summer. It was like the best thing of my life. But yeah, after like you get into college, visiting colleges is super, super helpful, because I thought I was going to go to Columbia over Stanford. Because the way it works, something interesting about Columbia is that it's split up into like two sections. So there's Columbia College, which is like liberal arts, and there's the Science School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And they have different like application processes almost. And Columbia, maybe admission ranking is like 6th, maybe? I don't know. But they have like maybe a 6% acceptance rate too. But when you actually break apart Columbia College and School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, the Columbia College one is like much, much lower than the average. So something interesting that someone told me, I don't know if it's true, is that Columbia College is actually like the hardest school to get into, because it gets weighted against like School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. There are just fewer people who want to be engineers. I don't know if that was true, but that was like compelling to be like, oh, I should like give Columbia a really close look. And I eventually just like visited both schools and just like liked the culture of Stanford more. And this is like way in the future for you guys in like deciding where you want to go to school, but I had like really helpful advice when you get into colleges. A lot of colleges will have a student call you. So both a Stanford student and a Columbia student called me and asked me, like, just talk to me about my worries essentially about their school. And I just like felt like I jived a lot more with the Stanford girl. She told me that I should pick whatever school I would eventually just ultimately be happy with on a Tuesday evening, like Tuesday night. Where can I imagine myself? Where would I be happier? Because college is like such a unique point in your life. You just want to be happy and be able to like thrive and do whatever there. Then I visited both schools as well. But
So they don't hold it against you that you didn't visit a college. Is there a point in the application where if you had visited them, you could? Is there a question that says why this college? And then if you
Yes.
visit them, you can say, okay, this is why, because I fell in love with the professor, whatnot.
so that depends on the school. So I know that Columbia has a Why Columbia essay. Yale has like a paragraph of like why Yale. So it's like maybe 4 sentences. Harvard and Princeton don't. I think Princeton might. I know Harvard doesn't. So some schools do, but it's dependent on the school. And there are also some schools that ask you to like check boxes. So I think one of the East Coast schools does this too, and I can't remember which one. But they ask like, have you like visited our campus? Have you gone to an informational session about our campus? Have you like met with an alum on our campus? Things like that. You can check those boxes, and those are also very helpful to like convey interest in your specific school. Because I think that's something that is overlooked often, is not just like how good of a student you are, but like how much do you actually want to go to this college, right? Because if you're a great school, they're probably or if you're a great student, they're probably gonna have to compete for you with a couple of their peer institutions. And schools care a lot about their yield, so like how many students they accept actually attend their institution. So they want people who really want to go, and that's why applying early is very helpful. Because if you apply early, you send them a very strong signal that they are one of your first choices, because you chose them out of like all the other schools you could apply to apply early. So there are places to check, and it does help convey interest, I think.
So can you talk about, I understand what early decision is and it's binding, but I've heard anecdotally that there is an early something else,
Sure.
which is not binding.
So there's three ways you can apply early. One, well, some schools do rolling admissions, but I'm talking mainly about like UCs and the schools I apply to. So there's early decision, which means if you apply to them and you get accepted, you have to go. So all the Ivies that aren't Yale, Harvard, and Princeton are all early decision, unless they've changed in like the last year or so, but I don't think so. They're all early decision. So if you apply to Columbia early and you get in, you're going. Like there's no way around it. If you deny it, they send a message to all the other colleges, and all the other colleges know you denied it, and you don't get in anywhere. So early decision is serious. Like, you don't break that promise. Then there's restricted early action. Restricted early action, or just REA, is just you can apply to them early, and you don't have to go to them if you get accepted, but you can only apply to them early. So you can't apply to them and another school. So they know at least that you squandered your one chance of applying early on them. So that also sends a very strong signal that you love this school. Then there's non-restrictive early action, so just normal early action. It just means that you can apply through their early admission process. You can apply to as many of them as you want. If you get in, you don't have to go. So Stanford, Yale, Princeton, and Harvard are all restrictive early action. So you don't have to get in or you don't have to go if you get in, but you can only apply to them. But so let's say if you do restrictive early action, that's it. You're done. That's all you can apply to. If you do early decision, you can also do a non-binding early action. So, right, because early decision you have to go, but the early action one you don't have to. So there's no conflict of interest there. So like UChicago, I know, does early non-restrictive early action. Honestly, it's the only one I know, because it's the only one I applied to that, like, oh, Georgetown does too. Georgetown's also non-restrictive early action. So that's like something to take into account too, like which school you might want to angle yourself towards and which one like you like best.
So the 4 REAs, which ones? Stanford?
Oh, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. There's obviously more, but those are the only ones that I know of.
Right.
So early action can combine with non-restricted early action combined with ED.
Yeah, you just have to make sure there's no conflict of interest, right? So restrictive early action, there's going to be a conflict of interest no matter where you apply, because the rule is you can only apply to them. Early decision, the only conflict of interest is if you reject them afterwards, but that doesn't conflict with you applying to another school. So if you get accepted to both your early decision and your non-restrictive early action, you have to go to the early decision one. Like, let's say you got into UChicago and Northwestern, which is also early decision, I think. Even if you like UChicago more than Northwestern, it doesn't matter. You're going to Northwestern.
If the student didn't take the campus visit, how would you recommend they write an essay? Why college? For example, why UK? Why Duke? Is there any tip you can recommend?
So yeah, I didn't visit colleges. I don't know. It just like never crossed my mind for some reason. But like I think if it's actually useful for your child to look at the colleges and see if they want to apply or not, if they have a really large pool, definitely helpful to go to the college. For me, it was just like, was it worth like the money trade-off, right, of like flying to the East Coast and all that stuff. But if you don't visit the college, what I did that I found very helpful was you have to research something that's like very unique about the college. So Stanford happens to not have a why Stanford essay, so it like wasn't a problem. But for example, like Columbia has a why Columbia essay. So I wrote about, what did I write about? So I had to research something like very, very specific about the school and about like, they have these things, and I don't remember what they're called off the top of my head, but essentially like the president of Columbia hosts all these seminars where really famous world leaders come and give talks. And like lots of famous people come to good schools all the time, but Columbia's is like very established and lots of people come all the time. And I loved that. I thought it was like a very unique thing, and being in the center of New York City gives a lot of access to people like that. So I wrote about those talks. I wrote about this one, they had like a specific major at Columbia that I thought was interesting. It was like poli-sci / econ or something that was like a good mix that not all schools had. So I wrote about that. So it has to be like very specific to the school for why essays, because if they can envision the essay that they're looking in front of you being replaced with another college, like you just like copy paste another name into it and it still makes sense for another college, then that's not a good why essay, because then they know that's probably exactly what you did. So it has to be more specific. So like UPenn, for example, has a lot of really special programs. Like UPenn's an interesting school because they have like the School of the Arts and Sciences and whatever, but they also have like the Huntsman program, which like combines international relations, and their Wharton School of Business. They also have one that combines like science and business. They have one that combines management and engineering. And it's just like a lot of interesting programs that are very unique to UPenn. So writing about those programs, they know that it's very special to you. So like writing about, it just has to be specific. Like I don't know what to tell you. It has to make sense. Like obviously I shouldn't be writing about Stanford's great computer science department given my profile, but also something that is very unique to that college. And something that's helpful for Y colleges that I recommend is getting students from that college to read it. Because I did this and it was super helpful, because I've written something about Columbia like some club they had on campus that I thought was like really cool. And then I like sent it to a Columbia student to read, and they were like, I've never heard of this club before. It's a tiny club on campus. It probably has 5 members. I was like, oh, well, like that's not helpful, right? Like it seemed like a big thing from like the internet. Like it seemed pretty legit to me, but apparently it's like not a big thing on campus. So having like actual students from that school read your application for that school could be very, very helpful to see if this actually makes sense in context.
How do you find such people? Network?
Well, they're like older students, so at whatever school your student goes to, there's going to be a student above them who like applied and got into some school.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so like that was helpful for me, like siblings, friends of older siblings, yeah, or like your friends' older siblings, like that other way around, like things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, to like change the topic a little bit. I noticed how like in your presentation for the like intellectual vitality, you gave examples of like selflessness and success or whatever. So what's intellectual, like how, because I'm not really sure like what intellectual vitality means.
No one
knows.
Yeah, so I think the idea about like selflessness and its importance is, that one's probably more about the way she had written it than like the topic itself, right? Because that topic itself isn't like something extremely unique, but she didn't want me to read it, so I can't read it, but it was essentially just about like an experience that she had that like really showed her something. It was like a very personal thing that she like put out on paper that I think was like very brave of her to do that other people didn't do.
Yeah, just I thought like before today I thought the idea of like intellectual vitality was reading like thoughtful like reading books.
No, it's like intellectual vitality means, so like no, okay, look, let me preface this saying like literally no one knows what this means, so this is just my interpretation. I think that's what makes this essay so interesting, is that nobody knows like what it's about, but you still have to write something about it. So I think it means about like showing that you have like seen something or like had an experience that demonstrates that you're like intellectually curious, if that's what makes sense. So like it can either be like just something you value, so like selflessness, or a book that you read that changed your life, which is like an experience, or like a camp that you went to, or just like your general high school trajectory, but something that like changed a little bit about the way you thought that made your perspective like unique in some way. So that's, I know that's a very broad definition, but it just needs to be something that they can see you like sitting in a classroom, like a small seminar, like 10 people, professor, 10 people, and you will say something interesting in that conversation. You have something to contribute because of an experience you've had or a belief that you hold very dear or something. Yeah.
Does Stanford have a foreign language requirement?
I don't know if you have to take a foreign language to get in. That's something you can easily find on the Stanford admission page, though. I did just because UCs require that, and like if you want to have the chance to go into UC, you have to. But once you get into Stanford, you need at least a year of a foreign language.
Talk about your Stanford life since the times.
Oh,
sorry.
My Stanford life? Yeah, I can talk about my Stanford life. What do you want to know about it?
Whatever.
Is there something anyone's like specifically curious about my Stanford life? It's like pretty comprehensive.
I
So.
also, before going into your current life,
Yeah.
anything about interviews?
Oh, so interviews, this is like my opinion, but also opinion a lot of people told me. I don't think they're that important. And the reason why is that, first of all, it wasn't in my, well, I guess I didn't have a Stanford interview. If you're from the Bay Area, you're probably not going to get a Stanford interview. That's just the way it works. They just don't give people in the Bay Area one. Interviews, I think, are more a chance for the students to get to know more about the school than the other way around. So my opinion about interviews is that it's more likely to harm you than it is to help you. So if you say something like catastrophic in an interview, or just like can't speak in front of the interviewer, then that's going to be a problem that they're probably going to write. But I don't think a good recommendation from your interviewer does that much, because it's so diverse, right? The interviewers are just alumni from the school. Like, if you graduate 1 year out, if I graduated last year, I could technically interview for Stanford right now. And like, what do I know? Like, why would the admission officer trust my opinion more so than maybe someone who's been interviewing for 20 years, or maybe like a 50-year-old who's interviewing for the first time? It's just too varied. That I think what it really is it gives people an opportunity to hear from someone who actually went to the school. So I think like prep for your interview so like you don't sound horrible, and like try to sound good. Obviously, try to like get along with the interviewer, but I think I'd be hard pressed to find an example in which an interview was a reason someone got into that college, if that makes sense. Yeah.
If you have an extracurricular that isn't related to like your theme of the application, does it detract from the general?
I don't think it detracts. I think it only detracts if you don't have a theme, right? If you do too many things, but I don't think it detracts to have like other interests, right? Like they don't expect someone to be one-sided and only know one thing and only that one thing. So like I had done FBLA like it was business, but it wasn't related to what I was interested in high school. People like play music while they're like really good science people, and those aren't related really at all. So I think it's not harmful if you do an extracurricular that's not entirely related, but just be sure that there still is some kind of focus.
If you apply for a restricted early action school, does that mean that you only have to apply to that one school? Or?
It's for the early process. So there's 2 tiers of applying. One's early, so that means you apply in like November, beginning of November, end of October area, I think. And then there's regular admission, so you apply end of December. So restrictive early action means in the early cycle, so the first of 2, you apply to only that one school. And then maybe you like, let's say, I don't know, like Princeton was your top choice and you get into Princeton early, then if you really want to go to Princeton more than any other school, you're done, you don't have to apply to any other colleges. But if you don't get in, then you still have like, you find out maybe mid-December, then you still have those 2 weeks to send all the rest of your applications. So it's just helpful to maybe give you a gauge and get a head start if you want.
So you applied for Stanford?
Oh no, I didn't apply early. But I didn't apply to Stanford. I didn't know what college I wanted to go to, so I didn't, but should have.
So you just applied in your...
I applied regular. I heard in March, yeah.
Did you work with a college counselor outside of school?
No, but I like have heard like stuff from other people because I had like friends who had done college counselors in the past, and they like helped me like with advice and stuff. So like a lot of what I'm saying now is because that was advice they had given me. I didn't like come up with this on my own, but although it like makes logical sense. But I think that a college counselor is also something that's like very personal. It's whether or not you think it would add something to the application or not, and I don't know. It's like I think it's entirely up to you whether or not you want to use it. I think it can be helpful, but they can also be very expensive. So that's up to you. Yeah. Cool. So if there are no other questions, thank you for coming. Oh, you want me to, sorry. Yeah, you wanted me to talk about my life at Stanford. What about it though?
The first one, like going to sex internship, how you apply for that, how you...
Oh, cool. Okay, so yeah, I decided sophomore year or last year that I wanted to do finance, at least for this summer. I don't know if I want to do it long term yet, but like you mean how to get a Goldman Sachs internship?
How you approach for that?
Okay, so if at one point in your child's college career, like work-life career, they're interested in working in finance, something very unique about like investment banking, some trading firms are different, but like investment banking is that a lot of it is like networking to get in. So you have to like know someone in the firm who's able to refer you to get you just the first round interview, which is a very long, arduous, and very painful process. So I knew some people who had done banking after their sophomore year as well, so I knew it was possible. So I went to every event that was held at Stanford related to like Goldman Sachs investment banking, like got to meet people, called them afterwards, they offered to forward my resume, and that got me the first round interview. And then after that, it's just you do a first round interview, and then if you pass that, they fly you out to the headquarters. So I went out to New York, and you do something called like a super day, which is like several interviews in a row, and then afterwards you get the offer or you don't. So
how do you find when you arrive in Stanford campus, what are the things that you find out most? I guess you have to adjust to what are the things you find that are easy and it's easy for you to adapt to?
Yeah. So I think I've changed a lot as a person since I've been to Stanford, because I think in high school I was very much stuck in I think what is it, like a typical mindset of like, oh, get into college, like period, right? Like people care a lot about it, and for good reason, because it's like an important first stepping stone. But I think once I got to college, I realized that like most people that are at Stanford aren't like that, or most people at these like colleges that a lot of people want to go to like didn't go through their whole high school being like strategizing it the way I just like laid out. A lot of people just like actually did what they were passionate about, and I think that made them very interesting people to talk to. So I think a trap a lot of people from this area fall into is like, oh, that person above me did all these things, so let me do that one thing that they did and like that'll help me. But I don't think that's the way to go about it. That's why I was like stressing so much to do what you're really interested in, because a lot of my friends at Stanford, like they were not like world renowned celloists, or like they didn't like win every science competition known to man. They were just like interesting people who did something that they were very passionate about. So I think like that's something that was like very surprising to me, and it helps you like I think take a step back from like the mindset of the area, even though I'm like still in the Bay Area, and think really hard about like what's actually worth your time, like what's valuable. So I think that was something that was like a very good adjustment, and why I think people should just do what they're like really really interested in high school. Something else is, I guess something that was easy is I think if you come from this area, classes tend to be like easier than you would think. Not to say that they're easy, like the classes aren't easy by any means, but a lot of the schools in Silicon Valley are like top tier private and public schools, right? So high school. So no matter what, like you had a good education, and when you compare that to a lot of people who come from like maybe an area that like isn't so like focused on education, or maybe they don't have great teachers, it can be hard for them to adjust like the academic lifestyle. But I think almost every person I know who came from the Bay Area who ended up going to a good school like adjusted fine academically. A lot of it is like adjusting to like the social life and adjusting to like just being by yourself in another place.
Yeah, speaking of the social life, how did you find Stanford's culture, or like what you noticed, what surprised you, or
Yeah. So I think something to just know about like any college your child goes to is that people will drink underage. That's just a thing, unless you go to like a very, very religious school. But like pretty much like they're almost all gonna drink, and that, I won't lie, is a large part of any social life at any school. So I think that the way I adjusted was, first of all, like that's an aspect of school, but it's not the whole aspect by any means. It's just something to know will exist at any college. But it was fine. Like I found it very exciting to be with people who aren't from the Bay Area, to find friends who like, one of my best friends like from the Dominican Republic, one is from like China, one is from like Mexico. It's like cool to see people from different areas. I think just being like very open about that. Everyone's like very nice. And I think it depends on what school you go to. I've heard of some schools being more cutthroat than others, but I think Stanford specifically does have like a very open culture. It's very friendly, very welcoming. So I didn't think it was like too hard of a transition in that way.
and also another thing I'm just like curious about is how would you compare like Stanford's culture to that of like other schools you apply to?
Yeah, so I can't say for sure because I've never gone to any other school besides Stanford, but is there like one school in specific? I would say that an interesting difference is like the East Coast West Coast divide. So most of Stanford's peer institutions are on the East Coast, and I don't know if any of you parents like ever lived on the East Coast, but it's just like a different vibe there. Like people are a little more fast paced, they're a little more intense, they're maybe a little bit more cutthroat, it's cold there. There's like little things like that that do add to like the culture of a place. My sister though, like she went to Yale, she had a great time, and it is freezing in Connecticut. So I don't think that's like the be all end all, but I do think that people on the East Coast probably tend to be a little bit more from like a more like established routes, if that makes sense. Like a lot of them went to like New York prep schools or like Exeter, Andover, those sorts of places. A lot of their parents are from the East Coast as well. Well, I think we find at Stanford people are a little bit more, they're the people who are looking for the California environment, right? Who are looking to be a little more laid back and stuff. So it's a self-selecting pool of people who apply to the school and of people who go. So I found it to be like very, very like laid back compared to when I visit my friends on the East Coast. Any other questions? Yeah?
So workload in college is heavier than high school or lighter? I'm talking about sleeping hour.
Oh, so the question was about workload. I sleep so much more at Stanford than I did in high school. Mainly because like high school you start at like 7:30 a.m. and when you're a teenager there's a ton of studies that show that teenagers like can't sleep before midnight. It's just hard. So I slept like maybe 6 hours on average my junior year, maybe even like 5.5 my senior year, and then I would like sleep 12 hours on the weekends, which is not healthy and do not recommend. But in high school, in college, it's different because you have a lot more control over your own schedule. So you take like I'm a quarter system, so you take like 3 to 4 classes. Semesters take 4 to 5 for a semester, and that's the only class. And classes meet 2 to 3 times a week for maybe 1 or 2 hours. So you just are in class for physically less time, which gives you a lot more time to do other things. Homework is maybe due once a week. It's hard homework though, so like it takes you a long time, but like it's only due once a week, so you just have a lot more control over your own schedule. So I can tell myself I'm not going to take any classes that start at 9 a.m. because I want to be asleep at 9 a.m. My classes will all start at 11 a.m. I can sleep in then. I can do my homework in the afternoon, and I can do it like whenever I want. So there's just more flexibility, so I get more sleep as a result of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that afterwards. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Thank you. Are there any?
Did you see this?
It was closed. I just clicked this button.
Little bit can see this.